Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. We're in beautiful Leeds. We're at the Nave recording studio, as you can see, a former church. And we're going to do a little bit of a shootout between myself and the great Adam Nolly Getgood. Yes, the world-class producer, engineer and mixer of all kinds of metal genres. We're both going to record drums in this beautiful studio. I have never recorded in this room in my life. I've never been in this room in my life. Adam Nolly does have an advantage of knowing this room, but you know, we've all been thrown in the deep end, myself many, many times before. So let's just take the challenge and see what we get.
So jazzy, man. That's it. That's so sick. I was going to stop you, but you just nailed the rest of it anyway. So I just want to make a point of how good Jake's performance was on that. Because you can see, if you look at the screen, we're not really clipping, a little bit of clipping on some of the preamps, but something like the snare bottom or the kick, like kick into mic, you're not seeing that as an effect of like saturating the preamp. That is just how consistently Jake has played the tune. He's absolutely nailed it. Every hit is so even in volume, and we just know that that's going to make mixing a dream. Or in fact, probably better still, look at the overhead channel here, this channel here. You can see that looks like an export from like a programmed drum library rather than a live performance. So just want to give a big shout out to Jake, who absolutely nailed that performance, and that's absolutely what you want in a session drummer. Hey, I'm Nolly, and over the next couple of days, I'm going to be working with Christian to do a really comprehensive guide on how to record drums for rock and metal. We're going to be looking at everything from drum selection, cymbal selection, drum tuning, microphone selection, how to engineer drums in any space, and also how to take advantage of brilliant spaces when you're in them. We're going to look at processing on the way in. We're going to talk about the philosophy of tracking drums, how to make sure that your drummer is comfortable and happy while you're working with them. And then we're also going to go into post-production and mixing as well. So it's going to be an action-packed few days. I hope you enjoy.
So this has been a lot of fun. I haven't done my drum recording yet, but Nolly has just completed his. The Josephsons are your microphones, yes?
They are, yeah.
So those are the mics that are on the toms. I know it's unusual to start talking about those first, but when you see my setup, I'm going to steal that because I was at Blackbird a few years ago, and they said, you've got to try these mics out, which I thought was quite powerful because that studio is obsessed with vintage equipment.
No doubt. Yeah.
So if they're loving these on toms, there's got to be a good reason.
There's a certain star power about them. Everyone loves them that hears them. And I think the really nice thing with those is they're designed by Steve Albini with the guys at Josephson. I really like the voicing because it's not super far away from a dynamic mic. They haven't gone to it because they're condensers, but they haven't gone for a condensery high end. It's actually got more of like a dynamic or ribbony top end, but then you've got 2 extra octaves of low end. And that's the real thing for me, is you can stick them on an 18-inch floor tom like that, and you've got all the low end you could need. You don't need to be kind of reaching for EQ or like bottom miking or anything like that.
Well, that's the thing. I learned from working with Dave Jordan, you know, top and bottom mic.
Yeah.
He would always do 421 top, 421 bottom, and then obviously flip the polarity, reverse the, you know, on the bottom mic. And really the only other thing I've done is put large diaphragms on it, but then there's always, you're spending ages getting the cymbal bleed out and stuff like that. But these seem to fulfill, like you were saying, that extra couple of low octaves. How do they do that even?
I guess just it's a condenser, right? Like compared to a dynamic. And I will say, Steve Albini uses them top and bottom exactly like you described, actually like quite vertically up and down. But I've done that because I've got 4 of them. I've done it on a 2-tom setup, and I just don't really see the need.
Right. Well, the only other time we did it, when Eric and I were at Blackbird, we did rack and floor, which we're going to do today, and we just put them on the top, and they were phenomenal.
Yeah. Well,
great.
Enjoy them.
Tell us about what you're doing with the kick drum.
Yeah. So the kick drum, and I'll just mention for a second that we've just come off the back of doing the course with Christian. We had a metal setup, kit in exactly the same position, same microphone selection, and we just pulled them away, substituted in some drums for a rock setup, put the mics back into place just with a few adjustments in positioning. So the first thing is always, as a fail-safe, and often ends up becoming the main part of the kick drum sound, I use a Shure Beta 91 in, or a similar kind of mic if one of those isn't available. So a PZM mic, a boundary microphone that can sit in the middle of the bottom of the kick drum, and it picks up so much great clicky attack. It's really good for feeding back to the drummer's ears when they're tracking, and often it gives just a really, really cool quality to the attack. That means you're not reaching for kind of real extreme high end on the other microphones. I always double that up with a dynamic mic of some sort. Here I'm using a Beyerdynamic M88, which has actually become probably my favorite. For me, it's the real middle ground between those kind of like the really flat mics, like your RE20s that you sometimes see on there, and the more kind of EQ'd mics. Like, I mean, a D6 is a long way away from that, but, you know, going...
Did you go through the time of using D6s?
No, I didn't. I don't know why. I think I always found them a little bit soft sounding, but the 91...
To a classic rock guy like me, a D6 is like a super scooped D12.
But the scooped is the softness. It's very bright, don't get me wrong, but actually it's missing the hardness of the upper mid-range a little bit. The scoop is so wide for me.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I mean, it's a cool mic, but like I was saying to Christian earlier as well, I'm getting the click from the 91, and the dynamic is more of a character microphone for me, and I'll happily substitute it for other things, like an Audio-Technica ATM25 is actually quite close to the Beyerdynamic. Yeah, really good.
Oh, okay.
D12 I'll use, D112, a dynamic that's got a nice kind of hard transient. It's not got too much top and it's not too scooped out, and that works really well as a kind of secondary mic. But then you can usually EQ quite a lot of top into those, and sometimes that can become the primary mic in the mix, but you know, you've got a couple of things to balance. And then on the out, I'm using a JZ or JZ V11, large diaphragm condenser. That's, I think, their own design. It's got a lot of low end, and it's quite dark actually, and I just really like how it picks up, especially the low end of the drum. Nice. I don't really bother with sub kicks. I've done that a lot in the past, and these days I tend to prefer a mic like that. You can low pass and get all the low end you want anyway, like you might want from a sub kick, but you've also got the option to get some other stuff from it too.
And now, I mean, I always traditionally use a DBX 120, you know, the Subharmonic synthesizer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, when we're working hybrid, but these days there's so many plugins that can just add that ooh, ooh.
So I'm not that familiar with that. So what is that generating a subtone off? Oh,
so it's a Subharmonic synthesizer, yeah.
Right.
They made one in the 70s called the Disco Boom Box, yeah, which was like 19-inch, but like 3 or 4 U, and that was sold to DJs.
Okay.
Like, not just broadcast DJs, but DJs,
club DJs,
and they would just feed the low end through that, and it would just add this
because everything, of course. I'd love some disco boom on this drum sound.
So I love that. I always feel like the mix is just that little bit classier when you can hear that ooh, ooh underneath.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'd like to think that this kick drum, and we were using a 24-inch drum, which means both the attack is really knocky and kind of rock, and then it's also got a bit of extra low end from all of that air movement. So
lovely.
I think we've got everything we need frequency-wise from that.
Well, snare is up next. You've got a 57. What model of Neumann is that?
So that's a KMS 105. It's a hypercardioid handheld vocal condenser.
Yep.
My friend, very talented producer and studio owner, Pete Miles, he owns a studio called Middle Farm Studios
Wonderful
in the UK
studio
that I've used a lot. He discovered, at least in my circle, he had some of those for backing singers, and I think one day he was like, let's try it out on snare and other things, and he discovered that it sounds phenomenal on snare. It really is, I think, one of the best snare mics that you can get. The bleed is very minimal, because it's designed for stage use, you know, minimizing spill from other instruments. I guess I'll just say also that it doesn't sound like your average small diaphragm condenser, because, you know, some people like to do like a KM84 or a C451 with a 57, and those sound cool, but they don't do what that does, because that's actually got a bit of bite to it, unlike those which can sound a bit flat. And yeah, you do what you do. Originally we thought about maybe you not seeing this setup.
I'm going to put the drums back there. I don't know anything about this setup. Of course I do, but if I went and repeated your setup, it would be completely pointless.
Yeah, it would be pointless.
And I came into this room and thought, well, I'd probably start with the drums back here. I'm going to baffle much tighter. I'm going to want to get as dry a tone as I can while also getting ambience as well.
You've got the curtains as well you can draw on that end.
That's what we're going to do, yeah.
And I think, to be fair, I think maybe I'm one of the only people in this room that sets up the drums over here, so...
Well, apparently, according to Tom, since you've done that, they've started incorporating it more, so now more people are getting...
Right.
Because the smart engineer, as you know, walks into a studio and says, where does, how do you normally record drums? And when they start saying, well, actually, you can get a great drum sound here, this is what Nolly does, people will start going, oh, okay, cool, let's do that.
Yeah, well, to talk about it for a second, I really want to emphasize, for me, I really care about the experience of the drummer and me when I'm recording. And I get that, you know, historically drums would be at the back, set up like a stage, all the musicians around. But when we're just doing solo drum recording, I love to be much closer for both of us. I think even though we still have to go through doors, like that closer visual communication, it just makes everything feel more intimate, you know what I mean? Like not romantic, or could be, I guess. But like just that feeling of like, okay, we're really in this together. Yeah. I do quite a lot of work at Real World, where we typically record in a single room, where I'm in the same room as the drummer. I love that for the same reason. You know, it's like, it would be like I'm there, but there's no glass in between at all, and we can just, if the drummer's got an idea, it's 2 seconds to go backwards and forwards if I want to touch up tuning as well. And then, oftentimes, this end of the room in studios tends to be the drier end. I just like that idea of the drums can go there, there's normally a big rug down there which we pulled up to make that end extra splashy, so therefore the far room mic sounds, you know, gigantic. And then I guess the very last thing about setting up this way, which is one of the most important, I think, is I really like having room mics behind the kit. Because when you look at a kit from here, you're on the batter side of everything. You're on the batter side of the kick drum and the toms and the snare. The cymbals are further away. If you've got drummers with like floor toms coming around like this, they're actually arcing towards the room mics instead of the things that you want in the room mics going more and more distant. But obviously 90% of drum recordings are done with the room mics on the other side, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But
so you're making me think now. My old room, I would have had the drums pulled out from the wall just enough, and then I would literally take an equilateral triangle and mic the reflections on the back wall.
Okay, yeah.
And so they weren't pointed that way, but they were pointed of the reflections from here. So I think I might do that again with all we're talking about. Because that's how I used to record at Swinghouse when I had that studio. Right. And people used to love those room mics.
Yeah.
So, and I used, because we didn't have any good mics in those days, I used a pair of Audix, like their entry-level large diaphragm condenser.
So I've recorded at Swinghouse in the big room.
In the blue stage?
The blues, yeah.
That was my studio.
Okay.
What did you record in there?
I recorded Animals as Leaders.
When did you do that? What year?
2014 or 2015.
Wow.
And exactly that. I mean, the engineer, gosh, I
Robin?
don't remember. No.
Well, now
Sam.
Sam was my engineer, yeah.
Sam, okay.
So he
Sam
basically,
engineered
that was my drum setup.
Okay, yeah.
So you've recorded my drum setup. My work is done.
U67s, or they were Peluso 67s on overheads. And
yeah.
He did the resonator kick drum. He did the resonator kick drum.
Yeah, that's you've recorded my drum setup.
There we go.
Yeah, those Audix mics on the back, on the low down on the wall, that was my thing.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
And a single mic, it was a mono mic right in front of the glass, quite high up. That sounded good.
Yeah.
That's
Did
funny.
you do the 57s either side of the walls? Did he do that for you?
I don't remember.
The big
that.
rooms, we do reflected off the walls 257s.
It probably was that. I don't remember. There was a stereo pair.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So you know,
as soon as you said Swinghouse, I was like, wait a minute.
yeah, it was the blue stage. Yeah.
With the API console.
The API console,
clasp
20
tape
channel
system, we went through that.
You used the clasp as well?
Yeah, I mean, Sam set it all up, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's how we did the whole, half of the Aerosmith record was done in that room, exactly the same thing through clasp.
Wow. Hilarious.
It's so funny.
Yeah,
I never knew you did that. We never connected over that. That's hilarious.
No, I
We're
had
doing
no
it on
idea.
camera.
We are, this is good.
Yeah, okay. Did you like the drum sound in the end?
It came out really good, yeah. I mean, I was a lot less experienced.
Right.
And I wasn't there on the setup day, which was really the setup night.
Yeah.
I flew in from Australia to LA and got off the plane and went straight to the studio and we started. But Matt had loaded in and Sam had gotten things mic'd up and unfamiliar room and everything. I just kind of let him do his thing.
Yeah, he just copied my setup, which he had done thousands of times.
Right. And people love the drum sound on that record. You know,
Great.
I was inexperienced.
Thank you.
There's lots of things I'd have done differently. No, thank you.
Marvellous, that's really cool. All right, so this,
Yeah.
why the hi-hat mark like this?
The position?
Yeah, why the position?
Okay. Something I really love to get nerdy about is the setup of the kit. The tightness of the cymbals, hi-hat especially, the tightness of the top cymbal versus how open and closed it is. It's a really important relationship that I liken to action on a guitar versus string tension. You know, like you can have a really tight cymbal and have it really close together and that's one sound. And then the hi-hat really doesn't move at all. It's very stable in the overheads, but it maybe doesn't breathe as much. And a groove player will probably complain, a bit like a lead guitarist complaining that the string gauges are too heavy, that it just doesn't feel good for what they do. So a lot of the drummers I record actually keep the top cymbal quite loose, and that means there's generally a lot of this going on the hi-hat, which from a recording perspective is not always ideal because sometimes when they're striking, it's flinging frequencies over to this side, and in the overheads, the hi-hats are kind of, you know, panning themselves every time they're getting hit.
I hear that a lot, yeah, I know what you're
So
saying.
I try and find a happy medium, but then in the close mic, I've found the going off axis reduces any kind of air blast.
Snare bleed.
Well, yeah, so the bleed is, I mean, that's pointing, you know, directly away from everything, so it's very isolated, you're right. But yeah, the SPL isn't a problem, like if they're hitting open hats hard, like a lot of the drummers I do, sometimes you're getting those air blasts every time they hit from it flinging air. And then so that the angle is also pointing at I got Jake to play the hi-hats open and see like where the hi-hat was relatively stationary, you know, like the fulcrum of the swing, and I'll point the mic at that. It just allows you to get closer in, more isolation.
What about stick though?
That's not a problem. The overheads get loads of that.
So you don't miss any of the actual stick hit?
No, I don't. For me, this came into my head earlier. I think of the spot mics a bit like, I use them a bit like use parallel compression. I want something that's very static, that I can bring up, and it's just going to fill out the information that's missing from the overheads. The overheads get great stick definition. You know, they're great for the attack of everything, the attack of the sticks on the drums and on the cymbals. So I can get whatever I need from there. And if it is a really quiet part, I can always boost the overheads. I can even boost the left overhead, you know, to really focus in on the hi-hat. I'm not too concerned about that.
So speaking of overheads and also individual miking.
I think it's just the ride of the
just
close
the
mics
ride?
left, yeah.
Okay.
So I don't bother with the off-axis on the ride. Mm-hmm. And in general, as you can see, I am a big fan of Neumann small diaphragm condensers.
Great.
We were talking earlier, I know you don't love the newer ones as much, the 184s. I think
I just got spoiled from the 53, 54, 56s. But correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to make an assumption. You can tell me I'm wrong, because I noticed with your metal setup, like Bob Marlette's a good friend of mine, Ulrich Wild as well, and they're similar to you in that there's what I would call more spot miking going on with cymbals, where I think for classic rock guys, we tend to like either have an XY or a spaced pair over the kit, and we use our overheads more as like, here's the sound of the drum kit.
Yeah.
And we're not using our cymbals necessarily to cut as much. Is that...
I think I'm a bit in between what you're describing, because I'm definitely not one of those guys that close mics crashes.
Right.
I don't like that. I love the sound of the stereo overheads. That's what I really want to use as my main sound. And that's why the close mic, as I'm saying, I'm trying to just kind of blend up some information underneath. So with this setup, it looks a bit overkill because there is an overhead per crash. So I guess literally there is like, there's a mic for every cymbal, but typically the drummers I record have big arrays or quite, I don't know why, I seem to record lots of tall drummers. Jake's a tall drummer, so sometimes the width of the overheads ends up being such that it can be useful to have something in the middle to reinforce a bit of the center image of the kick and snare. These overheads are spaced from the snare drum, so the kick drum tends to be pulled off to one side, which I don't mind at all. But that mono overhead can be good for that. For example, with the splash that we had set up for the metal.
I know, I saw the mic coming up from underneath.
Yeah, but with that center overhead, I don't even know if it's going to be necessary to use it. That's literally something I've only added in the last 18 months. That's a pretty new thing for me to do the mono overhead. And it's not as loud as these two. I
might do a mono Coles.
Yeah,
like pulled back.
Slightly different thing, I guess.
I might do that, yeah. It's only... I don't know if that would make it into a final mix as much as maybe just soloing it and using it for a breakdown mic or something, Yeah. I have no problem in the wonderful world, I'm sure you're the same way, of now that we have so many potential inputs, I have no problem with recording more than I need.
Yeah.
And then, because some people are like, why have you got 18 mics on the drums? I'm like, yeah, in the final mix I might use half as many.
Yeah.
But if I'm recording an album, I can go, hey, there's a section that goes, and that could be any different combination,
I agree, and I think there's a big difference in intention between if you don't know what you're doing and you're just throwing up mics to cover all your bases because you don't really know what you want.
Yeah.
That's very different than being really sure about the mic so that you put up and then being like, actually, throw up some wild cards, you never know, might be useful. And there's a little bit of that going on with a couple of mono rooms that I typically prefer stereo signals for rooms, but sometimes those can be cool for a little bit.
Well, I'm going to steal one of your room mic ideas.
Cool.
Because it's you put a pair of stereo mics. Are those KMNs as well?
So those are Audio Technica ribbon mics.
Oh, wow.
And that's, I have to, Tom from the studio, he was like, oh, we could mic up the corridor. I think the first session I did here 8 years ago. I just let him do his thing. I feel like, with an adjoining space like that, it's so reflective and splashy. It's really like a chamber, I guess.
Sure.
And anywhere you put the mics, there's going to be some flavour of...
I love the idea with staircases. I'm hopelessly romantic when it comes to music.
Right.
And we were in Hansa Studios 2019, just before the old Dan Pemick, and they have a stairwell there that they would mic up, and that's on like Heroes and The Idiot, Lust for Life, like all these Depeche Mode, U2, all these records that were done there. And so how can you not want to mic up a staircase if you got one,
It's lovely, isn't it, the thought of all of that music reverberating around in real time, isn't it? Yeah, I get you. In this case, it's very much like, it's so washy. It sounds amazing. Yeah. Also in the mix, sometimes it can be a case of it's too washy with the cymbals, but we took a couple of samples and you never know, like you could just pull the sample of just that and trigger it off the snare or something, and then, it's from the same session, but you're not worrying about bleed. Yeah. So that's more of a bit of fun. I mean, this space is huge.
It's fantastic.
As I'm talking, I can just hear my voice reverberating around back there, especially without the carpet. So really, what we've got going on, we've got the overheads, that's your top-down view.
Yep.
Then I've got this pair here, and this is doing what you were describing more as like the whole kit picture.
Yep.
So this I'm seeing as like an extension of the overheads, really, but it's more shell-focused. And the really brilliant thing, they're in figure 8, by the way, these C414s. I sometimes use Coles or ribbons, and I just like how the figure 8 works for this. The great thing about not only being on the batter side of the kit, but being on this side, is that the drummer is blocking the left side in the right mic and vice versa. So what you get really good sound off all the drums, but the imaging is insane. Sometimes it could verge on too wide, I guess, maybe. You could maybe angle in a little bit or use cardioid or something, but if you listen to those close rooms, the hi-hat is on the left and the ride is on the right, and the toms pan and the kick and snare sound really central and attacky. And what that means for me, I've got so many recordings where I've got lots of cymbals to contend with, love the sound of room mics, but oftentimes put up your close room mics and you just collapse the cymbals down and they start to sound washy in the middle because the hi-hat's washing all over the place, and you lose the definition and stereo image that you worked hard to create with the overheads. And since I discovered this, which again is relatively recent, and kind of stumbled into it, recording in certain spaces, and this idea of being closer to the drummer, I just love it so much for the sound and also the ability to then make it loud in the mix without disrupting the stereo image that you've created with the cymbals. So.
Nice.
And this position has a really good balance of drums and cymbals. So.
Amazing. 2 more things we haven't covered. Yep. D12.
Wildcard mic, so a bit like we were describing before. This is a mic I've thrown up as like, it could be cool for a moment. I had an idea in a previous studio when I was coming up with a wildcard mic. I was just thinking, the D12s and things, back in the time that they were invented, they weren't kick drum mics as we tend to think them now.
Voiceover, I think.
So they do sound kind of a bit trashy because of the era they come from and the technology, I guess. But because it's a dynamic, it's got a naturally rolled off top. So I thought it's probably not going to be too cymbal heavy. And I love how it sounds. It's really good. I found a spot in the room, and I'll mention with the room mics, I'm putting on something to just block sounds. I put on my headphones, unplugged, and I get the drummer to hit the snare gently so that it's got a bit of bloom and low end to it. And I go around just waiting until I feel that, all the reflections coming in phase in a certain spot as they reflect off the walls, and that's where I put the room mics.
Lovely.
That ensures not only the room mics have a really good weight to them, so the low end of the shells means that the cymbals don't feel dominant, because sometimes it's not a question of cymbal volume, it's more that the shells aren't being reinforced by the room enough to kind of have their headroom there. And also it tends to mean that when you do a stereo pair, they don't sound lopsided. Sometimes you just chuck up mics where they look good and one has way more low end than the other because one's in a node and the other one's in a trough, So that just helps keep some symmetry when you then set up spaced pairs. And I've done the same here also to place the AEA microphone. I think every engineer that records drums...
I'm going to borrow this from you.
Yeah, they either have one or they lust after one or they rent one every time they record because...
And this is yours?
This is my one, yeah.
Nice.
I bought it a long time. Actually, the same time I got the Josephsons. I was like, if I get this, I know I'm sorted in any room you go into. And they're so versatile. It's a stereo ribbon mic. It sounds so natural, loads of low end. It doesn't sound lo-fi, like some ribbons, even I think sometimes Coles, I don't like how they sound for cymbals. I know they're really meaty. These
when you're in incredibly bright rooms, they're lifesavers.
Sure.
But you're right, it has to be something that's excessively bright because, the Coles at 13K are like, boop.
It's also like the upper mids, I feel like, are a bit boosted in a way that on this it's very natural. So you can use that as an overhead, you can use it as a close room, but I love only having to find one killer sounding spot, especially by the time you get to far rooms where we're quite diffuse by this point. I mean, I can hear the flutter echoes and everything, it's crazy ambient back here, and I just walk around and find where the snare's really exploding, and then you can just adjust the angle of it to make sure that you've got a good kind of left and right balance.
Nice.
And you just never have any complaints about that mic. It's always like put the fader up and it's like, that sounds amazing. So
fantastic.
And there is actually one more mic.
Yeah, where's
there
the
is
last
actually
one?
a Coles involved in this session.
Oh, I see
it's
it.
on the front side of the kit.
I'm going to have a Coles definitely as a mono as well.
So that's something because
that low end lift.
Yeah, I mean, because of the fact that all the room mics are on the batter side, I thought it's probably nice to have something with a bit of distance of the kick from the reso side. But obviously it's also, quite a typical kind of maybe trash or wild card position for people. Again, this time I got Jake to kick the drum gently and found the spot where the low end felt really big. Put it there. Who knows if it will get used in the mix, but especially knowing that...
People are going to be able to download and hear for themselves.
It sounds really good. I mean, as a one mic thing, it actually sounds pretty decent too. There's a good sound of the snare. It's actually not too wiry. Sometimes when you're down and on the snare side, like the snare's side of the kit, you can get a lot of snare wires, and this doesn't seem to have that. Maybe it's the Coles thing or the position. So
nice.
Now that I'm seeing it, I'm just going to double back to the kick drum and mention we have got a center port in the kick drum, which is making it very short, and it makes the drum sound very attacky in the mic, because the dynamic mic that I've got in the port is looking, if I were to put it in directly at the strike point of the beater. Some people like that. I've deliberately gone slightly off axis just to cool it down a little bit.
Sure.
So it's a bit of a flatter top end response that then if I want to boost, it's not full of all these like spikes in the attack.
What I think that's interesting. What I do is, here's where the beater's sitting. I come in a long way away and then point at it from an angle, because I found if it was coming straight at it, I just get this always crap out. So similar-ish idea.
Yeah, with a side port like we had on the earlier setup with the metal drums, I just put it directly in, so it's the beater's up here and it's kind of facing down there, and that. I've always found if I ever try and get more attack by going up at the beater or something.
But you have the beta in there. Exactly. I don't have that in my setup. I've used it a couple of times when in situations like you were in when you came to Swinghouse, where somebody else was already set up, and I was like, oh yeah, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Amazing.
that rounds it out, I think.
Yeah. Tell us about your setup when it comes to what mic pre's, what EQs, compression, etc. are you using on the drums?
Yeah, so firstly, I'm a big believer that all the important stuff really is on that side of the glass. Like
absolutely.
The setup of the kits, the setup of the cymbals, the selection, the drumming itself. Mics, the specific mics, as long as you're in the right ballpark and decent positions, it's going to sound good. And then I think here is even one step removed. Like you could run all of that into a really basic mixer and you could then still have loads of stuff to play with in the box and make it sound amazing. So I think this stuff is very much a luxury, and I really don't want to give people the impression that they need to have loads of fancy gear in order to make that stuff sound good. But with that said, I brought in a couple of my pieces, and then we're also using some of the pieces from here. We've also got the Amec console behind us, which I'm running some of the lines into. But the important close channels like the kick and the snare, we're pretty much using exclusively quite posh preamps. So we've got, for the Beta 91, the Beta 91 as you'd say. I
don't know why I call it Beta now. Yeah, the Beta 91.
That's going into a 512 API preamp, and that's running to the 560 graphic EQ. I'm quite happy with the kind of flat sound of a Beta 91. It typically sounds good, so I haven't done a whole lot. There's definitely no magic in the settings here. I'm just dipping a little bit of mid-range and a little bit of brightening, but I could do without that, and I really wouldn't mind. I'm running the Beyerdynamic, so my dynamic kick in through this, which is a Stam Audio 1073. It's their Mark II version. Big fan of what Stam does. This is, you can see through the vent, it is an incredibly well put together 1073 clone, like to the deepest degree. They've really sourced all the best parts they can. Hand built in Chile, which I have a bit of a personal connection to, since my wife is Chilean as well, so quite like to support them. This is what I'm using for the Beyerdynamic. I love to use Nave stuff for kick and snare. A lot to do with the EQ on these older, the 1081s, the 1073s, and a lot to do with the high shelf. Because
it's very broad, isn't it?
It's super broad, and when you see the picture of what the graphs do, if you look in the manual, it's really broad, but then it's actually cutting. So as you boost, you cut some cardboardy mid-range, like 500, 800, and then it goes the other way when you cut. So realizing that, I use this like a kind of presence control, especially on a dynamic mic, which is coming in sounding quite dull. It kind of cuts the area which sounds boxy, and also gives you the presence you want. So on a kick drum like the Beyerdynamic, I'm cranking quite a lot. What is it, 16 dB on this, on a 1073 at max? So
possibly, yeah, it looks a lot.
Probably like 9 or 10 dB of boost there on that presence band. And then the other thing is that the low shelf, again, is quite broad. So, it's not uncommon to boost something like 35 hertz, and actually you're boosting, it's a bit like a Pultec, I don't think it's quite as extreme as that. But I think, so here I've got this set to 60 hertz, and I'm doing some extra low end. So I'm kind of giving it a bit more of a smiley-faced EQ. When we did the metal thing earlier, I had this set to 3.2, and I was doing quite a lot of boosting as well. Same mic, different kick drum, but that gives it that clack that you want for metal. For rock, it's we're using a 24-inch bass drum on this. It's a pretty kind of knocky sounding drum, so I didn't add as much. I think it's still set to 3.2, but not as much there. So a lot of what I'm using this for, apart from the fact, as a Neve pre with transformers in, it's going to slightly have like a bigger sound, a slightly slower slew rate.
Biggest thing for me though is where you've got the trim all the way down and you're pushing the pre, and I love that.
Yeah, it's not distorting too much actually. Like it looks probably more aggressive than it is. The other thing is because I've got two kick drum mics, I'm not printing them super hot because I'm kind of relying on the sum of those to give me the kick in. I like to try and go into the DAW with, broadly speaking, appropriate levels for things. So I'm not recording anything like whisper quiet, but like, for example, cymbal spot mics, I'm not recording raging hot because I just hate when you pull up the faders and all you can hear is that, Room mics may be a little bit different when you get to that because you want to make sure there's headroom for compression later on. I'm not doing any compression on the way in. So I really like to use that for kick-in. That's a pretty posh pre.
Yep.
Snare top 1 and 2. So this is my Neumann KMS 105. Yep. To be honest, that's the mic I use pretty much just on its own most of the time.
Yep.
That's going into the Audix MA5, into the Neve, the AMS Neve 1073.
Yep.
And the Snare top 2 is the 57, and that's got the same signal chain. These pre's, the Audix stuff, so these are very much based on like Neve topology. Again, quite big sounding preamps. Comparatively, we're still talking about really subtle differences. The differences between that and that they're way more similar than they are different. I always like to emphasize that. I think preamps are a really nice luxury, but we're talking about small differences.
Sure.
I've used that without the 28K switch on the condenser. That's adding a high shelf boost, at 28K, but it's, I guess, quite broad and lifting the kind of sizzly stuff up top. That's quite nice on a dynamic mic like an SM57, so that's why I've engaged it on that one. Just, brighten up the 57 signal. In both of these, I'm using, again, that high shelf, more so on the 57. In general, I'm EQing the 57 more because it needs a little bit more work. Yeah. Using that boost to bring up the presence and also cut some of the kind of clocky, clunky sounding mid-range, with one fell swoop. Then I'm boosting a lot of low end. This is, again, set lower than you'd expect it, set to 110 hertz. Again, if you look at the curves, that's still coming well up into the kind of 200 area that you hear people boosting. I find if you set that to 220, which might be people's logical thing for a snare, thinking the 200 is good, it's kind of bring up quite a lot of mud too, because it's stretching up into...
I agree. Jack Douglas always used to tell me that, is like you go below where you want it, because then you get that nice, beautiful shelf. And you're right, you don't hear that or. Yeah. Quite often I hear people say it sounds very EQ'd.
Right.
And I think that's when you get fundamentals and just kind of exaggerate them too much.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think once I figured that out, it was like, oh, that's the sound of rock. You know what I mean? Yeah. As you work those two bands together on a snare drum, it suddenly starts to sound like a rock snare. And I think it's partly the EQ points and also a bit of the harmonic distortion. Yeah. It's kind of slightly creamy sounding, like splatty, softening of things. So it's kind of getting brighter, but also not poking you in the face.
Absolutely, yeah.
So for me, these are my EQs, or the preamp and the EQs, because I'd love to track through them. However, I will say, companies like Universal Audio are doing a fantastic job with their stuff, like the 1073 style EQs that they have, very happily record dry and maybe print some of those things into the raw tracks so that, it's a bit like tracking through that. I feel like it does a lot of the same thing. Wonderful. That's great to hear. Snare bottom, going through the Chandler Germanium. It's
that's a luxury.
It's a very kind of distortion-y, characterful sounding pre. It's snare bottom. I feel like there's quite a lot of leeway with that microphone. If it's in a good spot to capture the wires, you can kind of make it trashy or you can make it fizzy and in the mix anyway.
Guys like Simon Phillips don't even record bottom snare.
Fair enough, yeah.
And Ulrich Wilde doesn't. A lot of the modern rock guys I know are happy. I think Cameron as well, snare top only.
Really interesting, yeah.
I know.
That's a Terry Date thing as well, to do snare top only.
Both of them work with Terry Date.
Oh, did they? Well, there you go. I always capture a snare bottom.
Me too.
And yes, I can...
You can always mute it if you don't want it.
Totally, and just a little bit, especially if it's got a bit of a trashy character, can be a nice thing to bring in. I'm running that to the 550A and I'm actually boosting quite a lot of 5K on it, which again gives it that really sandpapery kind of sound. Yep. I might have over-egged it a little bit. Actually, when we did the metal thing earlier, I had it cranked up a bit more and I heard it last night. I was like, I could probably back off that. So back 2 dB on the 5K boost, bearing in mind that's going on to a 421, which is quite harsh sounding anyway. Yeah, boosting some top and some bottom. So the overheads are going through these 3 vintage Siemens preamps. I'm not too fussy really about what I use, but if there's some really nice preamps like that, then why not, eh?
And is HiHat going on the console?
HiHat's going on the console along with the Ride, the now dead Splash channel because we didn't record one for the rock session. The corridor mics are also going through there and the close rooms, I think, as well.
So then where are the toms coming up?
Toms as well, that's it, yeah. Close mic toms are coming up on the desk along with those. And I'm using a little bit of the desk EQ. Nothing magic, just boosting kind of 5K shelf and 100K shelf on the toms, maybe scooping a bit of mids. The one thing I'd say I'd like to do on close mics, especially when they're coming on the top of the cymbal, is boosting something like 1K into them. Again, something I've started doing more recently because when you close mic a cymbal, it's like you get all of the tss and you get all of the hong of the cymbal when you're that close to it. And I realised that kind of what's missing is all of that mid-range stuff. So I didn't really think about doing it before, but these days I like to actually put quite a lot of kind of 1.5K, and that seems to actually make it sound more natural, sound more like the overhead.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because the inclination with overhead sometimes is to pull out like 400-ish, because that makes your tom sound cardboardy. Yeah. But that 400 also is where you get a nice lot of body on a ride.
Sure.
So it can be a bit of a... That's why it is nice to put a spot mic on a ride and treat it its own way. Yeah,
and like we were describing in there as well, to have it almost like a parallel EQ or parallel EQ and compression that you can ride up as a fader.
Yeah, lovely.
You can do limiting, distortion to it and make it, super limited if you want to.
That's wonderful.
I think that's basically it. The front of... So there's the Coles and the D12 going through those... what are those AML pre's? And that's it.
Which I don't know. We're going to try those out for the first time,
Whenever I go into a studio, I like to work in collaboration with the engineer.
Absolutely,
shout out to Tom, who's been an excellent assistant throughout this. He works here as the head engineer, and I let him do the patching. He knows this room. I'm not a console guy or anything like that, so I tend to make far more mistakes than than I'm sure you will. And I like to kind of rely on their expertise, and also to be able to think about the bigger picture and be like, okay, while you're patching that, I can check that everything's in tune and set up well. You know.
When I first go into the studio, the first thing I do is apologise to the assistant that I'm going to ask them the same question over and over again.
Okay.
So I find that, you know, you patch everything in and then you're like, where's the hi-hat again? They're like, channel 19. Okay, cool. 5 minutes later. What channel's the hi-hat on? You know, it's like...
Yeah,
I think
they know the room much better than you, and when they're there, then it's a bit like when you use sat nav all the time. You don't learn the route, you know.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's fine. If the sat nav's there to guide you, then there's no problem.
Yeah, and then you can be focused on the creativity and use your ears.
Because we are coming in as producers and engineers to a degree, and it's tricky when you're trying to think about patching matrix and the song at the same time, you know.
No, true. When I first started making records, there was assistants, there was engineers, there was producers.
Yeah.
Then it got even more complicated because you had assistants, classic engineers, producers, and a Pro Tools engineer.
Right, yeah.
So suddenly there was even more people involved, yeah.
The evolution of the tape-op.
But the tape-op quite often was the assistant as well. But now you had a person that's only job was to kind of like edit and put together tracks. And yeah. And now, invariably, we are the producer, the engineer, the DAW engineer, I suppose, and quite often our own assistants.
Yeah. And drum tech.
And drum tech. Which, by the way, Nolly has been doing admirably for us. You've been our secret weapon and helped us quite dramatically in that. Thank you.
Well, you know, I really wanted to do this because I wanted to also get some insight into how you work and, you know, get ideas from working with other people. I think the more you can be exposed to, the better an engineer you can become. So... And I love working with drums. It's kind of what I made a career out of. So it's a pleasure to kind of come in and not have to think about this stuff and just be like, oh, how do you want the snare tuned? And hopefully do a good job.
Isn't it I think it's probably the biggest variable in a rock band?
Like the drum tuning?
Just drums in general, because the different person that gets on the kit, it can be a completely different drum sound.
That's true, yeah. Or certainly like the potential. Somebody like Jake, and again, I should shout out to Jake, who's a phenomenal drummer.
Absolutely.
He drummed in my old band, although we were actually never in the band at the same time. I've recorded him many times over the years, and I wanted him for this session because his hits are so precise. His volume is so precise, but where he hits the snare is the same every time. I love to use quite open-sounding drums, not too much muffling. And if you've got a ringy snare and a drummer hitting it all over the place, it's a nightmare because the ring is different every single time. When you've got someone that hits really precisely, you can have the drums wide open and every hit sounds amazing. I
noticed when you sat down, you were actually quite precise. You were laying it on the rim and the centre at the same time really nicely.
Yeah, I do quite a lot of the sampling actually for GGD. So I can't play the drums, but with my right hand, I got a pretty good strike.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And they usually end up being further back because to match the thing.
Metal guys.
But yeah,
we're just standing here like
the camera.
Can you get these guys
just like watching, standing in black, like
judging away? There's Judgy and Judgy McJudgelton. Judge and Judgy.
Warren. All right, so I think one of the primary reasons I wanted to do this was, you know, as an educational exercise. I really wanted to see how someone like yourself, a really experienced producer coming from a slightly different world, would approach recording the same track. So I'm really pleased with what we captured, and I'm very fascinated to see and understand perhaps the logic behind all the things you've done. As we described, I actually kind of got a sneak preview many years ago, unaware, didn't realise that I was recording in your studio and that the drums and miking were set up in the way that you usually do things. That was when I recorded Animals as Leaders, back in 2014, I guess, 2013, 2014. And we realised off the back wall mics, which we'll get to now, that actually I've experienced your setup. But why don't we go through it? I'd love to understand maybe a bit of the ideology behind, if we start with maybe the overheads.
Sure.
So for me, the overheads are a lot about cymbal capture. I've got a feeling that for you...
They're about capturing the kit, yeah.
Right.
You remember when we first pulled it up on the console, we went overheads, kick and snare, there's the drum sound.
Yeah.
Obviously based on the fact that the drummer has to play evenly, which of course Jake does.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, if that's not the case, you're really relying on individual mics quite heavily, and that's where gating and compressing and EQing and all kinds of clever stuff comes into a lot more play. But with a drummer like Jake, and especially as an experienced rock drummer, he's like kick, snare, kick, snare. When he hits his cymbals, they're not wash, 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 and tiny little kick and snare, you know.
Yeah, he's got good control on the cymbals for sure. But so I think you said they're 4 feet away from the snare?
I think we ended up at 48 inches because of the height of the cymbals. Yeah. But typically we go about 46 to 47, 48, you know, so within a couple of inches of that, yeah.
That's funny, because 4 feet was always my golden measure for overheads. These days, I kind of eyeball it a bit more, but yeah, so it just works, right?
Glyn Johns was asked several times about his 3-mic technique, and they said, what was the distance? And he said exactly what you said. He goes, I don't know, I just eyeballed it.
Yeah, and other people took the tape measure, and
Yeah.
That's funny.
But we did some eyeballing when we put mics up, like this one, for instance.
Right.
And
so that's a U67.
That's a U67, which is exactly the same distance away from these two mics and the snare. So all three of these are exactly 4 feet away from the center of the snare and exactly the same distance away from each other. So they form a perfect equilateral triangle. So the phase relationship is fantastic. But you saw me do it. We eyeballed it. We went, it's about here, and then measured it and moved it like an inch. You know? So I'm sure your eyeballing is within an inch of
typically, yeah. With the 67 and the 414s, you've got them all pointing towards the snare drum. That's a specific thing you're doing.
I've found that over the years, first of all, I never edit outside a group, all that kind of stuff. The reason why I bring that up is just to kind of illustrate that you obviously don't want to mess with the phase of any microphones. However, there have been situations where I've had to. And the only way around that, and the only mic that has any kind of latitude, is the kick. You know, I can, because the fundamental of the kick, we can argue about it, but 50, 60 hertz, you know, and then you want the subbiness of like 36, 40, something like that. That isn't in any of these other parts of the kit whatsoever, and doesn't need to be. So the reason why I build it around the snare is because everything that's happening in the snare, the low end of the snare, is similar to the toms, and there's you understand what I mean. It's quite well designed if you think about it, because it's high end to low end.
Yeah, that's true.
It's the kit itself. So basically, I can wipe out, you know, 80 hertz and below out of these overheads if I wanted to, and allow that kick to provide most of that low ends. Now, that isn't always what happens, but ultimately it gives me a lot more latitude, whereas you're now dealing with what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things. So what do you choose? Do you choose the 8 things versus the 1? Or so anyway, long explanation, but yes, I favor the snare because it gives us perfect phase, coherence, polarity of the top end of the kit.
Sure, and I guess you're getting very direct transient into the capsule, especially on the large diaphragms. I guess that's kind of important. So the U67, is that something you typically have leveled equally to the overheads, or is it a little bit quieter? Do the three of them kind of form?
The three of them tend to form. One of the things that concerns me over the years of recording drums, if there was a band in this room rehearsing, or you go and see a band live, I'm sure you know where I'm going. You know, if you pan everything LCR, it just doesn't feel real. And I'm not just talking about like the 70s records where it kind of went rack floor, you know, boom, boom, you know. Those are fun to listen to, you know, do, 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 do. I'm not talking about that. It just doesn't make any sense that, you know, that the drums should be so unbelievably wide that there's nowhere for the guitars to go. Over the years of interviewing people, I've found that a lot of people that mix don't go any wider than like 80. 70 sometimes on their drums, to allow the guitars to feel like they're just spilling out of the edges if necessary. I haven't asked you that. I mean, what do you do? Do you do full left and right on your overheads?
But I think it really speaks to like a mindset. So you pan audience perspective, right?
I do, because I'm not a drummer.
So when you are visual, when you're hearing a record, the visual in your head, if it's a kind of got like a rock instrumentation, where are you in that image? Are you in front watching the band playing? Is that right? Because I don't have that. For me, when I'm hearing drums, I'm sitting in the stool, where everything is super wide. You know, the hi-hats are there and the china is over there. And I think it's to do with like the amount of impact that you're used to hearing in metal, where it's like a snare drum doesn't sound like a metal snare drum when you're standing over there. But, you know, if you're right there, it really is kind of in your face. So I think that's the mindset for me, is like I'm in the drum kit. Well, so that's why it kind of pans round and sounds
totally. So these can go hard left and hard right. You pull this up in the middle, it brings it back into actually feeling. In fact, it does actually feel like you're just sitting there or standing here, depending how you want it. Basically, your head is here. I don't care from a perspective of which direction it's panned in, because, you know, there's left-handed people and right-handed people. So it's kind of a redundant thing. You know, I pan from an audience perspective because I'm not a drummer, and 99.999% of my experiences have been watching bands play.
And it makes sense from the control room too,
Yes.
right? Like you pan to where the instruments are physically located. Yeah.
I know with working with like classic rock bands, like with Aerosmith, you've got Brad and Joe, and if you don't pan them stay where they are on stage and have been for the last 50 years of their career, people will get very confused, because they're like, well, that sounds like Joe playing guitar, but he's on the wrong side, you know. So there are certain things, funny things, that you sort of have to adhere to.
Yeah.
But I remember talking to Jakia King about this, and he's like, no, I never go full wide on my drums, because, you know, there's an amp over here, an amp over there. Why suddenly are the drums wider than the guitars and stuff like that? But like every answer to these questions, it always depends, doesn't it? There's plenty of things where I've gone absolutely silly and made a rack tom over here and made the floor tom over there. There's no one way to do anything.
No, you create different effects by making those decisions, don't you? So I guess just one last point on the overheads. It pretty much looks like the positions, like where you're coming at the kit, you're coming in over the kind of rack tom and the left crash and hi-hat with this one, catching the floor tom and the far right cymbals with that one, and this one's bringing in, really capturing obviously everything, but it's looking through the kick, the ride and the snare. Is that kind of the visual that you're...
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the position on this, it's really logical. First of all, it's equilateral triangle, but it's getting a nice mono overview. If it was over here, it would favour the rack. If it was over here, it would favour the floor. Here it is, it's pointing at the snare, but it's like pretty much centered between the two toms pointing at the snare and everything else around it, and the kick is immediately underneath it. So it's a logical place to put a mono mic. If we got rid of every other mic in a setup and just use that, that is the most logical mono place to put a microphone.
And with the low end you get off that, if you boosted it, you could get a one mic drum sound, couldn't you? Yeah. And you're using large diaphragms everywhere, presumably, to get that. I
like large diaphragms on overheads. I know you like small diaphragms, and I think that's you know, not to say I'm typical in the classic rock way, and I don't mean this to be demeaning, but you're typical in a more metal way. Sure. Most of my friends that are doing more metal drums are trying to capture cymbals quite specifically individually, and small diaphragms, you know, are good for that, especially, you know, like with your splash one where you have it underneath. That's specific. I don't think I've ever done that, but then I've not made a record where I'd want to hear a splash defined like that, you know.
Sure. Well, yeah, metal, this would be a very minimal cymbal setup for something that I'm working on. Right. Like, I would typically have at least maybe 3 more than this with most drummers that I work with. Sometimes like quite different heights because of, you know, just where you can Tetris in your cymbals. And some drummers I work with...
Tetris in your cymbals. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, where can they go where they're not going to hit each other? Sometimes, you know, there's quite a challenge to get all the cymbals to come through clearly. And I'm not one of those guys that likes to have, you know, the really close mic crash cymbals. I like to have a main stereo pair that captures everything. But yeah, in my world, you really do need to be kind of focusing on getting that clarity in the cymbal. And a drummer, if he plays a fill and it's got a splash hit in it, he will want that splash to be as loud as the snare drum, you know, like to have that kind of evenness. So talking about close mics, and we'll get to the shells, but the very, you know, the next mic that's kind of visually very obvious is the Royer that you've got.
Yeah, so that is definitely a compromise in many, many different ways. Okay. So what I've done with ride cymbal mics before, typically, and I do love a 121, it's on the bell. And to be honest, 90% of the time I put 57s just on the bell, and usually as much away from other things, creating as much reduction as possible. So sometimes I'll have it kind of coming in slightly at an angle, or anything that isn't going to get too much bleed.
Right, so you really want isolation.
Yeah, just for a bell. And what I found is the Royer, a great microphone, when we had it more over the bell area, was pulling it up, was messing up the overheads quite badly.
It's got a lot of body, right? So
it was a lot of body, but actually it was cancelling out some of the low end and low mids, because, you know, it was probably, you know, slightly shifted and causing, you know, some phase cancellation. So I thought, I listened to it with it muted, and I was like, we don't really need it for ride. But if we are going to have a ride mic, and it was providing a little bit of extra splashiness, it was picking up the and a little bit more of the bell, obviously. So I said, if we're going to use it, let's put it in a position that it's not going to cancel out the low end. Because when we soloed these three overheads and he played the toms, there was so much body on the toms. And then just, time adjusting the close tom mics to the overheads, suddenly it was like, you heard, there's so much low end on those toms. Obviously those Josephson microphones, I always stumble on that one. Those Josephson microphones have a ton of body. And I just didn't want to mess with it. I wanted the toms to be able to be in phase with the overheads. And if this mic came up, I didn't want it to suddenly destroy my drum sound. So it's a little bit compromised because it is picking up more of the rest of the kit than it probably should. So and it might not be necessary, but for those of you that are going to download the multi-tracks, just play with it. If there's a moment that the ride needs to be featured, it can just kind of creep up. If not, it can just frankly be muted. But it's, anyway, sorry, to cut a long story short, it is exactly the same distance away from the snare as these other ones.
Right, yeah, that's interesting to know. And I noticed you didn't mention ever using a condenser on the ride. A dynamic or a ribbon, more rolled off top end. Is that what you're going for? Yeah,
I mean, the Roya is quite special on the high end because it does have good high end for a ribbon. Yeah. And then when you go to 10 or 12K and boost it, I'm sure you've had this experience, it's sweet, it's lovely. It doesn't bring up really harsh frequencies or anything like that. No. Whereas like a Coles, which we have out here, doesn't really have anything there to boost. You can go nuts on it, but really 5 to 7K is really all you can ever bring out. I've gone to 10 or 12 before and done a massive boost, but all I'm really doing is tugging up that sort of area of,
Do you ever utilise the figure eight of the ribbon to be able to cancel out other things, or is that not what's going on in your head?
It's not going on in my head. I know that there are people that do that, and it works really well in dead rooms. So we were in Barefoot Recording when Eric Valentine still had it, and Michael Pepe had a drum room that was probably the size of this carpet.
Right.
And he had maybe just a little bit bigger. And he had a kit set up like this. The drums just sounded fat and dry and 70s and beautiful. And I'm sure he just added reverb and he had a great drum sound. He did a lot of that stuff because if you figure out the null point, and I know what you're saying. So if you've got a cymbal here and you've got a figure of 8 mic, that's nicely in the null point between the front and the back.
And if the room's dry, then the rear lobe's not getting...
Exactly, the room's dry, there's no issue. But if you're in a live room like this and you're thinking that way, I don't know if you can tell on these little lapel mics, you'll be able to tell obviously on the multi-tracks, this room's super live! And that means all you're really doing, is, you might get a bit of null from the cymbal, but you're also killing a close mic.
Room mic at the same time.
Yeah, it's also a room mic at the same time. As soon as you compress it, you're like, oh, why's my drum sound? I wanted desert rock. I wanted Hawkwind meets Queens of the Stone Age, and instead what I got was a ton of room. Yeah.
Well, actually, just to sidetrack for a moment, you've got the baffle set up around the kit.
Yes. Always
done that.
Is this
to dry up the close mics?
Yes.
Do you find it focuses the low end of the shells at all? Because I noticed the drums had a nice thuddiness, actually, that I didn't hear before when the room was totally open.
Yeah. It definitely helps in all of those respects. I like rooms to have some low end, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, in a mix, especially a dense mix, if you've got too much low end in your room mics, for instance, I want it to be on the shells. If it's in the rooms, you can get these incredible long kind of like boom build up, and it's awful, especially in the genre you do in this track here where you've got super fast kicks. If it's just go, there's no definition.
That's true.
So I end up usually removing a lot of excessive low on room mics, but I want them on the shells. So to your point, exactly, yes, I want the controllability on here. And if there's a super fast kick pattern, like he is using double kicks, then quite often in those really fast sections, I'll go in and use a SPL transient designer or somebody's transient designer, and just shorten the sustain in the fast sections, and then just turn it off or let it be longer in the verses. If it's just boom, I can have it do that. It's beautiful. But yeah. I remember when we did the Black Veil Brides live album, there was so much stuff going on like that.
Yeah.
When we mixed it on the SSL, it was just like
shaking.
all this low end. But then when you can get it just short enough, it's awesome because you just feel this.
Yeah.
You feel it go on you. You know this. You're in that genre far more than I am. So you know, I'm preaching to the choir, obviously, and you probably have smarter and better techniques than I do. But
no, it's all super interesting. So if there were more gobos, because I guess you used all of them, would you have put them behind the kit, or do you like that liveliness?
because I love this wall. I mean, it was immediate, wasn't it? And it was interesting because Swinghouse we had plasterboard and then carpet.
Yeah.
And it was the most haphazard, whatever room, and yet it was one of the best sounding rooms I've ever recorded in. But it was completely and utterly accidental. We just wanted to try and cut down a lot of like high-end flutter. So we put panels up randomly all over the place and kept kind of going in, and we had a PA in there and we play things through and just kind of move things around. And the weirdest thing was putting the carpet around there just kind of deadened the room enough for guitar amps.
Okay.
You know, one of those things, somebody said to me the other day, they were talking, they were a drummer, and they were talking about, how do I get my guitar player to turn down? He doesn't realize he's blowing my head off. I was like, get his amp and tip it back. Because at the moment, the only part of him that can hear it is his feet. You know what I mean? They're standing here. Here's the 212 combo, 100-watt two-tone combo, which is literally on 11. Right. And he's standing here like this, and the poor old drummer, maybe it's an open back, is over there, just this low down, hearing this thing hit him in the face, you know. And so we found that by creating that kind of like deadening down there, it really helped a lot of those kind of high frequencies that were all caused by amps. Now, did it solve it? No, not at all, but it helped a little bit, you know.
So we spent quite a lot of time talking about like the overheads and a bit of the room setup. Let's talk about, let's say, the kick mics. So what have you got going on the kick?
There was many different ways we could have done the kick. And I feel like, I'll be honest, this was a concession, a FET 47 to a classic way of recording a kick. I don't think that is the best outside kick mic ever made. I don't.
Yeah.
It is the most commonly used one. I think a FET 47 is a nice mic, but I've actually had better results with other large diaphragms, sometimes a lot cheaper. One of the best ones I ever had was an Audio Technica, which was like $800 as opposed to like a $5,000 one here. You know, we came here to be like, if you're in the studio and the mics that were available, what would you do? And I would put that up. They don't have another large diaphragm. We exhausted their large diaphragms, you know.
Yeah.
Here, we did quite a lot of room miking and stuff. We have the 87s high up that we're using. We kept their way of doing it. Like, what would you do with and that's where they put them. Andy, one of the owners, said, oh, I'm really glad you used my miking. And I was like, yeah, I mean, you know this room. You say it sounds great. And so we did what he would have done. But in this instance, it's okay. But we did do some fairly aggressive EQ on it. And then the D12 is just a bog standard. And it could be a D6, it could be a Beta 52, it could be a Sennheiser, what is it, the 602, thank you, which is actually a really good mic and like under $200, 200 pounds, you know. That's a really good mic. We used to use that pulled out quite often. A really great sounding mic. Anyway, the point is we could have used any of those. The D6 is obviously a little bit more pronounced on the attack, and you don't have to do as much work to it going in.
And so you happy to kind of choose, not at random, but just let the chips fall where they do, you know, this is the mic we have.
Yeah, this is the mic we have,
yeah.
And so even though I do not believe that this is the best mic for an outside kick, I don't think it's a bad mic, but I've never put it up and been like, oh my goodness. But there have been other mics that I'm really blown away with. And maybe I should buy one of those old Audio Technicas, because this was 2009, whenever I did the second Fray record. And so it's been 14 years. I should just find the model number and buy one because it sounded fantastic. And it was completely accidental because we were tracking the album live without a bass player.
Okay.
We didn't have a bass player in the band. They never did. And then Dan Rothschild came in like for 4 days and retracked the whole album. But also because once they had him in a room, they were like, we need to do something live with you. We need to have that experience of playing with you because he was such a wonderful player. So we cut a couple of songs live with him on the record. And there he is with the flip top, and I've got one FET 47. I'm like, well, FET 47 is the outside kick mic, but it's also one of the ultimate flip-top mics. So what do I do? And I sort of eeny, meeny, miny, mowed it and ended up going, I'm going to put this on his, on his amp, which sounded great. And then I just took this cheaper Audio Technica. I was like, well, I suppose it doesn't really matter, because I had three different mics on the kick. I was like, it'll be fine. I put it on, I'm like, wait, no, this is better. It was just more open. This is very low, middly, all the stuff that you cut.
Yeah.
It's a weird one,
Yeah. I've never really... Kick out mic is never a huge deal to me. Like, it's not something that gets a lot of level in the mix, but I've never heard anything in the FET 47 that blows me away. But
yeah, and I probably, we're talking about with drum miking and recording in general, there's always a romanticism. So we always want to try things that other people have done and become standards because we want to know why.
I mean, that is as close to a standard as you're going to get, right? A D12 and a FET.
Well, I think that, and then if we move on to the snare.
Sure, talk me through that.
Yeah, we started off with a 57 top and bottom, and the 57 sounded good, but it didn't seem to take EQ very well after we pulled up the Beyerdynamic 201, which sounded great straight away, and then with a little tiny adjustment on EQ, suddenly sounded phenomenal. And we were very impressed with the isolation. Remember, we were like, what's going on? So then you said to me, well, look, I've got a Beta 57, which has got much better isolation and will probably take the EQ better. We flipped it out, and it does have better isolation, and it did take the EQ better because it's got more of a pronounced mid-range, which complemented that. The only thing is we couldn't get the phase on the two to be too perfect, so...
Yeah, they don't look like they would be...
No, we had to move
time-aligned, but I guess that's just the nature of the...
Well, that's what ended up happening.
Yeah.
The capsule... Because on the Beta 57, it's got this huge thing on it, but the capsule's about here.
Yeah.
So when it was tip to tip, the Bayer capsule's right at the front, but the Shure was there. So we found when we shifted back the Bayer and put the Shure up, the phase alignment got better. But it's never absolutely perfect when you get two different kinds of mics, because they react to low and high frequencies in totally different ways.
Sure, yeah.
So we got it really, really close. There's a part of me that would probably say what we ended up doing when we're listening back is favour the 201, Beta 57 here. But you can either remove that or try it the other way around. That's up to everybody down at the MULTITRACKS to see what they want.
Obviously, the more even the level of the two, the more the phase discrepancy is going to become more difficult, right?
It's got that inherent low-end cancellation that's going to happen with any double-mic'd thing. I mean, when I mix bass, I'm sure you do it the same way. I only use one. If I've got multiple mics or DIs or whatever it is, I only use one for the low end.
Yeah, and in fact, I tend not to use a mic for the low end at all. With this,
I never use a mic for low end. Yeah. Unless I've been given two mics and I don't have a DI, then I choose the cleanest one and that becomes my low end. And if I'm only given a DI, quite often what I do is I just duplicate that DI, put an amp plug-in on it, distort it, have some fun with it, but wipe off all the low end and then use the clean DI on its own as the low end, put the two back together, and you've got a great bass sound.
Crossover approach. So in terms of the position, are they both aiming at the same spot? Because, I mean, it's a little bit back towards the edge from the centre. I mean, what it is probably still 2/3 of the way towards pointing at the centre.
The way he plays, because he's great, is he's getting a bit of everything, isn't he? And I like that. I think great rock drummers, can play the rim and the centre pretty consistently. And he is very consistent on his snare. So whatever you do, if I went higher and more pointed at the centre, I don't think I'd get as much rim. I liked the snare sound. I really did. And
we should say just about the drum, like it's something pretty close to a Black Beauty. Yeah. Quite a mid-rangey sounding, kind of impactful drum. It's very ringy. Did that impact, knowing that it's a ringy snare, did that impact where you were pointing the mic?
A little bit, because it's so ringy, I probably didn't have to pull back as much. Because it has, look, we talked about this yesterday, the best snare drum sounds are always just like a large diaphragm pulled back on the snare. If you're going to sample a snare drum just for sample snare drums only, you would just put like an 87 or whatever classic kind of thing and pull it back here and get an overview of the whole snare, top, bottom and everything. Pull it up and it's phenomenal. However, of course, it's going to, on a live kit, everything bleeds into it and it's completely useless. So Snare drum recording is always a little bit of a compromise in that respect, but that's why we love our rooms and why we love our overheads to kind of, add some of that missing stuff. So.
And in terms of snare bottom, you've got a regular 57. It looks like you're doing quite a similar thing, coming in at an angle. You're not going like vertically up on the...
Yeah, it's... again, you're never going to get the phase exactly right. You're going to give yourself a fighting chance, It's like double micing anything. If I double mic an amp, with open back, as long as the mics are both doing this on the speaker, no matter where it's on the speaker, then I'm in a good place. So same principle with the snare drum. If this one's coming in at an angle, then the one underneath should be the same angle. I mean, I think a lot of the time logic prevails, one would hope.
Right.
So
it's more about the relationship to the top than the picture you're trying to capture off the wires?
No, it's both, because the picture you're going to capture off the wires is going to be pretty similar to the picture you're going to capture off the top. So it would be, if I was only going to mic the wires, then yes, you would just put it on the wires, but I can't stand that sound. Yeah. I do want the snare bottom to do more than just go pfft, pfft. You know what I mean?
And what I found actually with that is you notice the kick setting off the wires more when you do that as well. So even though you're further from them here, you kind of notice less of the kick coming through, I've noticed with the snare bottom. Yeah, well, I agree. I've also found, actually, when I first started working with Dave Jordan, and he was the first guy I'd ever seen that would double mic everything. Right. Top and bottom, all of his toms. 421s, top and bottom, which became very standard. I thought I was going to have more phase issues, and actually found I had less. Because the bottom mic, as soon as you flip the polarity, was cancelling out all the crap, not all of it, but a lot of the crap that was coming into the top mic. Okay. Yeah. You know what I mean? So quite often that top one, when I got that only, and I'm pushing it up or compressing more aggressively, I'm bringing in all that hi-hat bleed. And with the bottom mic, when I pull that up, because the polarity is reversed, often it cancels out some unwanted frequencies. Sure, yeah. The stuff that's hitting both of the mics, yeah.
Yeah, because one's flipped.
Yeah.
So it cancels out, yeah. It's an interesting kind of thing. It's not like an exact science, because you would have to measure everything. That relationship would have to be the same as that relationship to it.
And there'd need to be the same volume as well.
Yeah, exactly. All of those things.
Not a panacea, but it does something.
But I have found that sometimes in those situations with double miking, it doesn't add to more bleed issues, which is counterproductive to your brain. But then you're realizing it's because you've got these other mics, that are, phase reversed and or polarity reversed. I've got to cover every base, because whatever I say, it's going to be wrong.
Right. So the next drums, well, the last bit of drum close miking would be the toms. I think it's pretty straightforward.
And that's all you.
Well,
and I learned that at Blackbird. We were miking, and the drummer we were working with said, they have these Josephson mics. They're absolutely amazing. You need to use them. Try them out. And so I asked for them, put them up the toms, and I was just like, wow. When you brought them, I was like, I didn't want to do anything that I wouldn't normally do. I didn't want to come to you and be like, I'm going to steal some of his things to try and compete and be. I wanted to do what I normally would do, and those, whenever they've been available, I've used them.
Yeah, I think most engineers that have tried them would typically opt for that over something like a 421, because it's not a hugely different sound in the top end. It's not one of those condensers that sounds really bright, but then you've just got all that extra lows to play with. So
I think everybody who's ever used 421s loves the sound of them on a tom. Yeah. They absolutely hate any cymbal bleed that goes into them.
That's true.
They are disgusting when the cymbal bleed comes into them. And there's a million ways around it, especially with modern DAWs, where we can gain down or EQ out or use fancy plugins. But ultimately, if we could use something like these microphones that doesn't have that issue, then God bless it, it's better still.
So in terms of the positioning, you're doing kind of 45 degrees, because Josephson themselves, a lot of the time when you see them being used, I've seen them at Blackbird and stuff, people are going parallel to the head with them.
Yeah, I know, it's quite strange.
And I think Steve Albini, who designed them, does that too.
Yeah.
Have you tried that? Was that?
I think we did initially. I honestly like picking up a bit of the stick, a bit more of the stick, especially in this track where, if it gets more and more dense, it's already like, stereo heavy pair of guitars and a bass. But if it got denser, which I'm sure if you carried on producing it would, at moments you'd make it, heavier. Like at the moment there's a pair of heavy guitars, all you've really got is volume to make it bigger, but you'd probably add a high line or something screaming.
Yeah, there's a few little bits, but fair point, yeah.
If there's a tom fill in the middle of that, guitar, and it's all just boom, 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 boom. Yeah. You're going to be sitting there trying to pull out a ton of top end to make it cut. You might as well get the stick you know.
I guess the decision would be, do you want the stick or do you want to hear the note of the tom more?
Yeah,
I guess, more parallel you're going to get.
I felt like that gave us both.
Yeah, that's the thing with the Josephsons, with that low end, like you hear the note.
I think on both, yeah. And to your point, and to go back to this discussion, this was another Blackbird thing. So, and I'm so glad that you brought this. So what this is it's a stereo ribbon, but it's pointed exactly through the kick and the snare. And so it gives us a perfect stereo image of the kit with everything in the center, as opposed to that sort of fake center where we're putting the kick and the snare center, but you know, our stereo mic, if it was in front, would really exaggerate, you know, kind of kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. So this is a nice thing. And often, especially, you know, because we're recording more mics than we need, often you can build the drum kit based around how that sounds. So you can pan, because you now have got your kick and snare in the center, and you could just put the rack will probably fall about 15, 20% over there. The floor probably about 30 or 40%. It's a little narrower than maybe you would pan, but you'll get a really beautiful, accurate image based on the sound of this. Yeah.
And I guess maybe something to bear in mind, which we had an issue where the initial position that was a bit higher, I guess you're getting more direction, more direct on the snare, but because that's two capsules stacked on top of each other, the lower one was getting a lot of the wind off the front of the kick and the top one wasn't, right?
Yeah. And that's my fault, because I came out and I saw the position and I got distracted. I went back in there, started playing with it, and I'm sitting there going, why? And we were messing around trying to figure out why we were getting like, it was like kick, snare, kick, snare, kick,
like
snare.
Really low-endy kick on one side.
Really low-ended.
Yeah.
Exactly what you were saying. The capsule was like here, so you had one part of the capsule was picking up the kick, and then the other one was above the kick and was picking up predominantly snare. Though they were both picking up a bit of each, but not enough to balance. And yes, as soon as I came back out and went, oh, I'm an idiot, and dropped it, now it's a really nice stereo image and a fairly, not perfectly, but fairly even kick and snare in both mics, in both sides, left and right.
So the other room mic thing that, well, I experienced this at Swinghouse, and it seems to be a bit of a signature move for you, are the back wall mics, right? So could you talk us through the logic there?
Again, equilateral triangle with the snare. So the snare, the distance between the center of the snare and that microphone, and the center of the snare and that microphone is the same, and also between the two mics. So it's an equilateral triangle from the snare. The phase is great. Again, it could be the drum sound. I would probably put a taste of the kick and maybe a taste of the snare, possibly. But the way he plays his snare against that kind of hard surface probably wasn't really necessary. I think in this situation, you could probably just put a little bit of extra lows in from one of the kick mics into that, and you've got a pretty darn good drum sound. Now, would it work against a really heavily dense track? Maybe not, because you want to grab elements of the drums and push them across over the top. But if it was a more Zeppelin-y, one or two string riff with a crunch tone as opposed to a raw kind of sound, it would be just a fantastic drum sound.
So it's really wide sounding, obviously, and they're pointing that way, so catching very much the reflected sound. Those mics, I guess, are hypercardioid, the Beyerdynamic
they're phenomenal mics. Obviously, people that will know that that's the famous Zeppelin mic. That's the
for overhead.
Use. So they have a very special sound. Beyerdynamics M160 is just an absolutely classic microphone.
I know you sometimes use condensers in that position. Would that be what polar pattern would you go for?
Well, in that situation, what was interesting was because it was at Swinghouse, it was the $300 Audix fixed pattern, no frills microphone that they used to make, and probably still do. And also remember, it was against a carpet. So that extra kind of brightness, because they're a little cheaper, so they tended to be a little brighter, was a nice balance against a duller surface reflected. But here we are with a very hard, very bright surface with a ribbon. So we're probably getting fairly similar results, to be honest. Not exactly the same, but where the ribbon is balancing out the more aggressive brightness, and the in the other situation, the very, very bright, aggressive microphone was balanced out by a carpet.
In a situation where you had limited inputs, and you've got enough to do the kit, but maybe just one stereo pair of room mics, what would you choose? I know obviously it would be space dependent, but would you prefer to have something like that that's a lot narrower, more beefy sounding front of kit, or would you prefer the like very splashy wide pair?
That's a really good question. I think it depends on the drummer. I think on Jake, those definitely, because they're special and unique. On a more splashy drummer, I'd go with this because it's the ribbons, a bit more controlled on the high end. It's a bit more focused on the kick and snare. And, you know, if I don't have a big room, then I apply a reverb on that and I've got everything I need. But I also think that that's probably something I would use with a more drier approach. Yeah. So they have different... I think if we were to create a drum sound with just, you know, one kick mic, one snare top, you know, if we went kick in, 201, pair of overheads and that, I think that we could make that a nice dry 70s drum sound.
Yeah, for sure.
Where that is not a dry 70s drum sound. The whole idea really of doing the gobos and using like the high mics and these different was to be able to go, here's a tight 70s drum sound with selection of mics, and here's pull in these microphones and suddenly we've got John Bonham, you know.
I think you go for a similar thing in that it's nice to have a kind of transformable drum sound, like different stages of ambience, you know, being able to either, if you're sending it to another mixer, that they can also have a bit of say in the vibe, but also section to section or song to song, you might depend more or less on certain kind of pictures of the kit. Is that right?
Yeah, I found when we were tracking and I was like muting and turning things up and down on the room mics, I felt like there was probably 3 very distinct drum sounds. And then there was combinations. But the 3 very distinct drum sounds were close mics, that mic, those pair of mics at the back, close mics, this mic, actually not those microphones. Yeah. They were good. They were fantastic. I loved them. But they were a little bit too splashy, a little bit too generic, if you like. Could easily be achieved. I would have just used those. They're different sounding, but there was more control and more interest. This is more special. It's like a really special sound. This was a pair of 87s high up there. It's just, hey, almost like what you do when you go to a big room. Let's throw up a pair of condensers up in the room. You know what I mean? I don't want to sound, there's nothing against that, but, you know where I'm going to go. Yeah. The next one is the hall microphone, is up the stairs. That is like that Hansa mic on the staircase, totally special. And I actually thought, you know, and that's where we share that because it's the studio trick. If you go close mics and that is an amazing drum sound. For somebody, so just take your close mics, and this is my humble opinion, your close mics, my close mics, far up that, it's a really special drum sound.
Yeah, because that operates, it's so diffuse, it's almost operating a bit like a reverb. Almost, like, yeah. But it's huge, obviously. I don't know what
absolutely
it is.
Huge.
2-second decay or whatever on it. Yeah. It's massive.
And so the only other thing to mention that we didn't touch on just here is the double miking of the hi-hat. And that's Dave Jordan. That's my dear friend Dave Jordan, who we know from Alice in Chains and Jane's Addiction and Herbie Hancock. He's
Offspring and also
Offspring,
like that,
Americana,
right?
yeah. It's a 57, which honestly is one of my favorite hi-hat mics. I sort of like the balance of a snare and a hi-hat kind of going as opposed to I must still have that 11 or 12K really pronounced in my hearing because I hate listening to records with egg shakers too loud.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
It's that
nails on a chalkboard.
Oh, yeah. And anything, especially some of the overly EQ'd, bad 80s sounding records when they made hi-hats, just painful to me. When you're sitting next to a drummer playing the drums, it's not this highly... And I used to watch people when I was up and coming and I would engineer for them or a system or whatever and watch them mix and just literally go 7K and above and then just boom. I used to do that. I used to watch people do that on cymbals with no body left in it. And everything was just horrible sounding to me. So I could quite often favor the 57. And Eric and I, when we're tracking drums at our studio, we use an SM7 on that because we have 4 SM7s.
It's not that different ultimately from a 57, right? A bit smoother, a bit.
But we don't even put a condenser on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right.
I've known guys that I really rate. They'll put like a Sans amp on a hi-hat they're given to mix. because it's so, and they want to bring in and they'll just distort it and just make it more aggressive and mid-rangey. But then, of course, there's a concession with a 451 there, which actually, weirdly enough, brought in more body and had a weird kind of airflow thing. Remember hearing that? It was kind of full. So I ended up using the AMEC EQ and just pulling out this kind of 450, 451. No, this kind of 500 kind of area that was really ugly, you know. And I don't think I got rid of it entirely. But I think, like anything, if you solo the hi-hat mic, I'm sure people will solo it and go, oh, there's still a little bit of that in there, which is a little ugly. But you know what? Put it into the mix. It's gone. You know.
And bear in mind also that the hats themselves are quite lightweight, 15-inch, so they're big and deep. They've got quite a dark character. So
they do, yeah.
When you get close up on them, you do get quite a lot of that body. I like them. They're still quite sizzly as well. So I think those are actually very popular hi-hats with many drummers, the 15-inch K light hats.
Ks are fantastic cymbals. Ks, we have all vintage Zildjians and Paistes, like the 2002s, you know.
At your studio?
At our studio, yeah. The only two cymbals are Blair when he brings in his Istanbuls. Those really sound beautiful. Yeah. Incredibly expensive, aren't they, those cymbals?
It depends. They have a few different ranges. Actually, they have a range that's actually quite inexpensive, and that's...
Oh, wow.
They're called the Exist series, and I only mention because actually with a lot of drummers, if they don't have cymbal endorsements and they want to know what brand to get, that's often a recommendation because they're B20, you know, Turkish-made cymbals, really nicely designed, and they're relatively inexpensive.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's
but
a
they do
great
have
tip.
the really, really expensive ranges.
Oh, yeah,
well.
their expensive ranges sound phenomenal. Phenomenal. They compete with the vintage Zildjians.
And why wouldn't they? You know, made by the lineage, all the families are quite crossed over, aren't they, in the Turkish cymbal making?
I never really got on with Sabians for a while. I always found them a little too brittle once I started trying to apply EQ. But I've softened to them, and now maybe a lot of the time it was the drummers that I was recording. Now
I think they've also changed a little bit. Like for example, the AAX range has recently been redone, the HH range. I think they're going for a more complex hammered sound where they were leaning more into the kind of, I guess, more towards like the Zildjian A's and A Customs, where it's a bit more of a kind of machined kind of sound.
Which is my thing, not at all. But so just to reiterate what you're saying, yes, I've always found that the Ks are the cymbals that can slot in a little tighter with some of our vintage stuff. So when people bring in some Ks, we can we go, oh yeah, those complement. They seem to work quite nicely.
So speaking of cymbals and microphones, there is another little one which I remember from Swinghouse. You had one of those very old salt and pepper mics.
Exactly. It was an Altec Salt Shaker, which is all mid-range. But the sound itself is completely mid-range because what it is, it's picking up this kick and snare predominantly, and this is the trick we've always done, which is put a chair over it. And the chair really is just trying to kill as much hi-hat as possible.
Sure.
And sometimes we put a blanket on it, we do all kinds of stuff. But you take the chair off, there's more hi-hat bleed in it.
So it's a 441 in this case, pointing at a cymbal on the ground.
Reflection of
kind of direct. It's kind of between the kick and snare, that side of the kit. So you're trying to block the hi-hat, but I guess you're getting quite a lot of the rattle off the bottom of the snare drum.
Yeah.
And the kind of shell sound of the kick. What's the philosophy?
It's basically, well, first of all, the sound you get is a kind of... It's super mid-rangey. It's awesome for breakdowns. If you just want that kind of...
Scene change.
Scene change, exactly, yes. Better, well put, yeah. For scene changes, it's fantastic. But also, I've found in a lot of, like... Indie's the wrong word, but, you know, if you think of, like, the Benz drum sound, Radiohead to Benz, there's a lot of that kind of mic sound in there.
Yeah.
Very unsophisticated is probably the best way of describing it. And being unsophisticated, it feels more indie, it feels more alternative, but it also feels a little bit more intimate and honest.
Yeah.
You know, because quite a lot of what we do, you know, with all this cleverness and clever EQs and compressions and stuff like that, ends up with, like, you know, you are listening to, you know, Jake in the biggest stadium in the world, going from this massive PA, you know, and it's boom, 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 and we love that, and it's so bombastic, and but where's that in a band, you know, a band playing in a rehearsal room, cool kind of, you know, naivety that we love, you know, of musicians working together. And that might sound really over-explained, but I feel really quite passionate about it, and if you mess with the phase and just time align it with everything else, And I've done all kinds of things. I've either chopped it up and moved it around, or I've just, time aligned it just back a little bit. It can be a saving grace of a drum sound sometimes that's got a little bit too heavily worked.
Right, it's kind of like character.
It puts a little bit back in. Yeah, if you've got your kick and snare and it's so isolated and so huge and so amazing, and your rooms are pumping and you've got a nice reverb on this and blah, 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 and the toms are like, boom, 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 boom. And you're like, yeah, I love this. But then you're like, oh, have I managed to turn my live drummer into a drum machine? By overly doing it, rather than strip everything down and start all over again, I can just kind of pull a little bit of this in and like, oh, now it's starting to sound like I'm in the room with the drummer now, and he's not at Wembley Stadium with a massive, 500,000 watt PA going anymore. Now it's back to like being like a rock recording, And I'm a big fan of it, and I've done many, many recordings where that is the main drum sound.
If you didn't have that, would that be an equivalent to, let's say, taking a mult in the mix of your shells or your snare and kick and running them through some kind of distortion or something like a kind of lo-fi
I'd probably use
thing?
Quite often I would start by looking at some of the mics. I remember there was this guy, I can't remember the guy's name, and if I did remember it, I shouldn't say it, because I think he ended up being fairly successful. But he was a guy that was coming up in LA, and he was trying to make a name for himself as a producer. And he gave me some stuff to mix. This is maybe about 10 or 15 years ago. And the way he had recorded the drums, I didn't have any proper overheads. And so I listened to like different mics, and I've found, I don't know if you've found this, that the tom microphone can be the greatest mono microphone on your kit, the floor tom.
Okay, well, it's good position, isn't it? Yeah.
Because of the position. So often, talking about what you did, you can actually take that floor tom and manipulate it. And it's very Glyn Johns, because Glyn would be back here pointing that direction. And when I often do one mic tests, this is a great position for a mono mic, but actually, this is my favorite mono mic position. Right. Having said that, it doesn't really work in this setup. It doesn't make any sense.
Right, but a more stripped back.
But if you think about it logically, I mean, Garrett can come over here. It's seeing kick, snare, everything. And we've done so many one mic tests where somebody sends us a mic to try out, and we will record a song, and we just put the mic here. And just boom, and it just gets this overview. So in those situations where I don't know what the heck to do and I want that kind of sound, I'll solo the floor tom and manipulate that a little bit.
When you don't have the options there, you can get quite creative. I've done things with like snare top, like through a Shure Devil Lock or something. Doesn't sound like a snare mic anymore, that kind of thing. But that is quite a unique one. And the treatment you're doing with the chair is obviously making it more balanced in terms of, probably giving you more headroom to distort and compress without the cymbals getting out of control.
Without all the cymbals going crazy on it,
So I think there's only one more mic, which would be this mono Coles back here.
Which actually didn't really,
Has that drooped overnight?
Because I think it's drooped overnight, it's drooped overnight. But regardless, it wasn't actually that good. And we didn't mess with it as much as possible. Again, I've done quite a lot of these kind of videos where we go to a big room and we try out tons of different mics, and you'll get these comments where like, you've got so many mics up. It's like, we've got so many mics up to demonstrate all of the different ways you can record drums. That can be a really, really good mono drum mic. But I found that I wasn't getting as much low-end lift as I anticipated.
So that kick drum's quite short sounding with the centre port. Maybe if you had your resonator kick, that might...
Well, that was one of the other things, was to try a resonator kick. And we talked about that. But then I was like, that's going to compromise this, which I really wanted to use because you had it. So if I put my resonator here, suddenly it's going to compromise that dramatically. And because we were sort of morphing as we went, at any point we could have done that, but I felt like we had enough. We had enough. And also the thing about the resonator kick, it's got a huge sustain, obviously, because it's only resonating with that kick. So every time that hits, it kind of goes doo, ooh, and the track goes do-do-da-da, do-do-da-da, at points. So if he's going da-da-da-da, do-do-da-da, it's just going to be another microphone that's going to add to that low end that I'm going to then have to try and shorten with some fancy plugin or gate or whatever. So in this particular track, it made no sense. But if it was like a boom, Gah, boom, 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 gah. I would have happily put the resonator down.
Sure. Or we could have maybe treated the kick drum
differently, yeah.
So on a record, maybe you might have done the resonator knowing that this song is not going to make sense, but other songs maybe you can bring in.
I probably would have. I would still have pulled the resonator because I wouldn't want the resonator in the room mics and in the overheads and everything. It just would have added extra work for the sake of it. You know,
Sure.
There's smarter ways to mix it to get low end out of it.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend time fixing a problem that I didn't need to create in the first place.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think that's it then, isn't it? That's all the drums. And yeah, it's fascinating. I think it would be very interesting to go through the tracks and kind of
Well, we should do it.
compare.
Let's go through the tracks.
So thanks very much for showing me all the mics and the setup. There's so many things that you've done differently to mine, so it's going to be fascinating to check out, you know, the comparison when we actually hear the audio. Why don't you dictate actually the order that you take me through the tracks, because there was clearly, you know, there's certain drum kit mics that really set up the sound. I think it would be interesting to have you kind of give me a tour of what you've got going on.
Yeah, this is a wonderful opportunity, and just so everybody knows, we haven't actually listened to this yet. Since yesterday.
No. Yeah, I don't remember what mine sounded like.
Yeah.
I think it was cool, but
I specifically, when we open the session, do not want to play it until the cameras are rolling, because I want that first reaction. What I think is going to be really cool about this is we can build our own, like we were saying in there, and probably the same for you, is we recorded more than we need, especially when it comes to rooms. And we wanted to demonstrate, you know, this is a class in how to record drums. So if we're not recording 18 mics and showing 5 different ways of creating drum kits, then we're not helping anybody. Yeah. You know, it's often a thing I've found with doing these kinds of videos, because I've done multiple videos on drum recording, but never had another, dare I say, world-class, you know, engineer to bounce it off and talk about this stuff. Normally it's just one of us demonstrating to the camera.
No, it's super cool. I'm really loving this. And like you say, in this kind of situation, it's important also, I often find, not to, if you only do it one way and only provide one set of mixing philosophies or engineering philosophy, then it can maybe sound a bit more dictatorial and people might take it really literally, like that's the only way it can be done. But doing it this way, I guess, you know, we understand that all of us are flexible in what we do and you know, different.
110%.
So take me through it.
So I'm very tempted, for my own edification, to build a drum kit really quickly. So this is the kick in, and I'm going to
sew the D112.
D112
that's going in through.
Yeah. So the D112. I mean, I've got it written down here.
Right.
Thank you, Tom, who was an amazing assistant. Yeah, D112. The so the pre was pretty sexy, for want of a better word. It's the germanium. So nice pre to put a kick in on.
That's one of those pre's where it doesn't take super experienced ears to hear the difference, right? It's got very coloured.
It's very coloured, yeah, very, very coloured. And then we went to a 560 EQ into a 160. So that's the 560 is the graphic. And I think you and I did similar things. I think I don't quite as hype the high end as you did.
No, but you've pulled out probably more mids.
But I pulled out more mids.
You were saying Dave Jordan, was it Dave that really like? You know,
no, it's Joe Ciccarelli.
Joe Ciccarelli.
If you see Joe Ciccarelli's 560 setting, it's like boost low end, cut mids, boost high end. Right. But he's compressing quite aggressively, so the boosts get pushed back in. Right.
So yeah, I think you didn't hype as much, but you cut, I think, a bit more than I did.
I think I was a bit more aggressive. I definitely will always go into like those low mids. Like the 250, I think, is completely out, or almost completely out on the graphic. That went into the 160A.
Oh, cool, right.
Which is an old favourite. I've used the 160A or the 160X or the 160XT. All of them sound phenomenal. And it's interesting because those are $150 on eBay. Sure. I think I saw one the other day because I looked for somebody who asked me. It was £120 or best offer. And they sound great. They really do.
How much were you kind of pushing into it? Was it quite compressed or just a little kiss? Or?
I think we were getting 2 to 3 dB.
All right.
There may have been a couple of times when he was going for it that we maybe got 5 or 6. But yeah.
Well, I guess the question would be why? Why did you compress it?
Because the kick in is completely isolated. I can get away with it.
Right. And you're trying to add some front to the note, or are you trying to bring out more sustain, or?
Well, there might be a little bit more sustain in this, but those are relatively fast. I mean, they came at a period where music in the 80s was starting to get a lot more sophisticated, loads more tracks, denser mixes, denser productions, I suppose. So they had to combat that. You know, it's not an LA2A. You know, it's not like a, oh, you know, I've got to compress today. You know, it's not about could you know. I think there's a sort of, I compress the kick in because I can, because there's better isolation because it's inside the kick drum. I don't compress the kick out. If I did, it would be really, really lightly for similar reasons as you were saying off camera, where you had an engineer over-compress a snare and you were forced to and reluctantly used a sample blended in because the snare drum mic was overly compressed. A kick in, I can compress more. It enhances it. It seems to make it just that little bit more aggressive. Because whatever you do with a hardware compressor, unless it's a look ahead, which is why we do use a look ahead in this, we're not doing broadcast radio, but unless it's a look ahead, it's always going to let a little bit of transient through. So actually it can add a little bit more excitement, especially where it's a rock track. So that little extra maybe transient that slips through might be a benefit to us, you know. And with the 560 boosting the high end, it might be exaggerating what it was exaggerating, just a little bit of the attack, and that helped the kick in cut across the heavy guitars.
Should we take a little listen?
Yeah, so let's listen to it on its own, we can do that. It sounds like a classic D112 inside a kick drum, and the kick drum's a good drum. Yeah. I hear a little bit of and maybe a little bit of 100 kind of build up. I find that sometimes it creates a little bit of masking in an area where a bass guitar needs to live.
Sure, yeah.
Do you have that sometimes when you've got multiple mics?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say just in general, especially in my genre of music, that low-end Tetrising often, you know, is really important. But there's some mixers that I really look up to that leave probably more 100 hertz meat in the kick drum than I do, and it does have a nice impact. It kind of makes like a more blunt thudding sound. The interesting thing, like compared to, we'll get to my sounds, but like it's less hyped, but you're exaggerating the transient through the compression, and I typically don't compress on the way in. So for me, it's a really satisfying sound. Right. And
so maybe we're getting to similar results, but in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe you're going to do more EQing later, and I might do more compressor. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I do like to, you know, commit to the sound, and but you know, one of the things was, you know, knowing your sound and knowing the kind of tracks that you do. You know, I could have definitely got far more aggressive on the EQ on the way in. I could have hyped it a little bit more on those highs and stuff like that. However, I just wanted to come in creating a drum sound that I love, and then leave the finessing to the mix.
The whole idea is for us to kind of just work in our normal, comfortable way, the way that we would do things. Yeah. You know, if we didn't have any influence from the other. So yeah,
like we were saying yesterday, you know, Daryl Thorpe and I record drums fairly similarly. You know, good mics, great placement, as much, you know, as little EQ and compression as possible, but wherever necessary. And then, but you know, some of the Foo Fighters stuff he's done is like super aggressive, you know. Yeah. As long as the tones are captured in a really positive way, he can tweak it a little bit this way or a little bit that way, you know. Well, the kick out, I'm not that huge a fan of, but we were very aggressive. We were even more aggressive on that EQ. Yeah. As you can see, there was a lot, actually, we went down to 30 hertz and the 63 hertz. They're both boosted quite dramatically because this microphone was very much kind of 100 hertzy kind of knocking kind of sound.
And that's coming out of one of the API 512 pre's, is it?
So kick out was on the desk, yeah. Right. I didn't engage EQ on the desk because I had another 560. As you can see, we got a lot more aggressive on it. Needed a lot more low end because it was sort of shelved more around about 100. And the cut is slightly more aggressive still. It sounds good.
I love it.
Yeah. But it didn't sound like that before the EQ.
No,
Remember, in and out, it was like, it went from do 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 to boom 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 boom.
Yeah.
If I do this. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. There's just such a lot of work to do with the mic.
No, and because that kick drum is quite short, in just its natural sound, that's really punchy. I like that a lot.
But it's interesting, like I said, it didn't actually sound like that before we added the EQ. But there are other mics I've used in the past which might have come up a little bit closer to that. But here's the two together. Now, the phase is really good, the polarity is really good, because I time adjusted the inside kick to match the outside kick. So now some people use alignment, drum alignment software. All I do is literally come along and figure out what that distance there is in samples and then time align it. So, you know, and I found an average because it's got to be on the sort of meat of the signal.
So you're measuring from the crossing of the 0 point.
Yeah, exactly. So if you see the meat of the signal, it's about 80, because there's that big lump of low end there that I really want to get. So I have to find an average. You know, you could argue it could be 84, 85, but regardless, it's quite a game changer. And I remember playing it to you guys in the room and saying, what do you prefer? And I remember you saying, I prefer it in.
Yeah, it sounded, once you'd done it, not having it on, it felt like it was a little kind of hollowness, and the attack wasn't quite as aligned,
Yeah, there would be just that, it would just cancel out in that kind of 60 to 80 area. I'll take it off and see how it translates on the wonderful world of YouTube. And back on. Off. I mean...
It's a big difference, actually.
It's a big difference.
More than I felt it from the back of the room yesterday, yeah. Arguably, it's a little bit less bright, like a little bit less clicky, but... Because
there's not all that cancellation in the lows.
Yeah. But in the mix, you've got so much leeway there.
Yeah.
Cool.
And again, you know, like you were just talking about, you know, with multiple mics, I know with Bob Marlette, he records 3 mics on his kick, and then he takes one of the mics and makes it only low end, and then takes out the low end of the other 2.
Yeah. Kind of crossover.
Yeah, it's almost like the bass guitar thing, And then he has one of the mics that's just snap. So it's got and snap, and then one that's just nice and brings in the body. Yeah. Again, doing genres closer to yours. You know.
So the snare top 1 is the 57.
Yeah, this is the 57, which ended up being changed out for, of course, the Beta 57. Yeah. And all of these have been time aligned to the overheads, which is why you see the overheads there. So they've all dragged back using time adjuster to be in phase with the overheads. Definitely, you hear the neodymium. It's definitely more middly. And what we ended up doing on that was, the Beta 57, the Avidas with EQ. So there's actually a decent amount of high boost on that, but because it's the Beta, which is very nosy, I don't think it's as dramatic as it would on another mic.
That's interesting, because those are my pre's and EQs, and I use those on snare as well. Quite similar settings, really. So you're grabbing the shelf at about 110, right? And boosting that, which, as we were talking about, those shelves are pretty wide, and that's kind of where you want to go for a snare, not higher up. Yeah. And then you're adding some presence, and then is it a bit kind of 3K as well?
Yeah, I think it was pretty wide. I may have started off your EQ point, tried something else and gone back to it. Right. But I don't think I added as dramatic as
No, I think I was boosting more top. Yeah. And then that's going to a distressor, correct?
That is going through a distressor because we wanted these two main snare drum mics to get similar kind of treatment, because if there was going to be any phase issues, you know, we don't want to add in like lots of different things that are faster or slower and blah, blah, blah. So the distressors were set up pretty identical. So this obviously was the Beta, which was the mid-range, the better rejection, and it took the EQ better. The 57, it didn't come to life, did it? It just sounded really boring.
Yeah, I mean, 57's, the comparison with the Beta or Beta, it's got more of that like 5-6K attack that sometimes when you're trying to bring more presence in, you're grabbing that as well, it's just getting more harsh or whatever. So I think the Beta gives you more of a flat surface to boost upon.
That was fantastic, by the way, because the rejection was amazing. We did have to tweak how the capsules aligned to get the phase as close as possible. But Tom, our assistant, recommended the Beyerdynamic 201, and this is it. That's just a fantastic sounding mic.
I've only tried it a couple of times and I've never tried EQing it in the way that we did here, but that's going to be one for the future for me because I love how that sounds.
Yeah, I mean, that's a wonderful sounding mic. The kick it in.
Just doing such a great thing. The character of the attack, the transient's got that lovely kind of beefiness to it. Yeah, I love it.
It's amazing. And if I just throw in those overheads, those 414s. So the 201 is the Avidas again, your mic pre, with the EQ. It took the EQ. Even without the EQ, we loved it, but it took great EQ back through a distressor. So those two top.
It's the same chain, isn't it? Yeah, on both.
Yeah, and then if I go to the overheads, which are the 414s, on the Seaman pre's, we just throw those in there. This is what we get. The hats are in there, they're beautiful. If we find some tom sections here.
Really nice stable image of the hats, actually. They're not dancing around, that's great.
Yep. I mean, kick snare, overheads, that you could mix that. You know?
It's very meaty on the toms, isn't it?
You could tell somebody that was 7 or 8 mics and they wouldn't blink. Yeah.
You know, the source sound is really good. It's a great
Exactly,
sounding
yeah.
kit, and Jake hits really well.
Great kit, well tuned by you, and a wonderful drummer.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference.
It really does. I think the number one thing when people say, how do you get a good drum sound, is you like start off with a good drummer on a good drum kit in a good room.
Yeah.
Sort of in that order. Because I've heard really good drummers make not very good drum kits sound great.
Sure.
A really bad drummer is a really bad drummer, even on the most incredible drum kit in the best room in the world. If they can't play balanced and it's all cymbals and there's no kick and snare, or one of the worst ones, I'm sure you get it, is where people write really over-the-top, complicated tom parts that they don't articulate. Sure. So it's kind of, go to snare, kick snare, and whatever you do, there's no attack, there's no transient that you to grab hold of. The cymbals are too loud, they're all in it as soon as you bring up the toms. So you sit there pasting in like tom samples to try and get some articulation out.
And then they'll play a different fill that they can hit, and it's suddenly okay, and then the next, yeah. Well, I always love analogies with cooking, and a great chef could be in a really limited kitchen, unfamiliar kitchen, and they've got the wherewithal and know-how to make something tasty. Maybe it's not going to be the best thing in the world, but it's going to be really nice. Put an inexperienced chef in a professional kitchen and they're going to be lost. There's no way they're turning out something of good quality. So,
I remember mixing a record I produced and engineered, an Augustana record, and Jim Scott was mixing it. They wanted either me or Jim Scott to make the record. And I got the gig, and the compromise was like, well, you make the record, but he'll mix it, and then he'll add kind of, his thing. And it was mixed on a Nave. It was an old RCA Studios Nave, and barely anything, like 1176s, he really kept to what I did and just did some EQ moves, and it was really, really nice. But we came up to this one song, and he's like, the chorus just needs a lift. All I want to hear is like some rakes just on a Telecaster. And I was like, okay. So he grabs a Telecaster, puts it on my lap, plugs it in, has a Pro Junior, puts the 57 on it, goes over to the mic pre, goes click, 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 may have clicked a couple of EQ points, all without hearing. And then we go to the chorus and I go, "Krang," and it's the best guitar sound I've ever had recorded. And I was like, how do you do that? He's like, Warren, I've done this thousands of times. It's like...
It's the Picasso drawing on a napkin thing, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway.
So the overheads, I think we've discussed that probably enough. The snare bottom, we ended up pulling down quite dramatically because, frankly, the 201 sounds so good.
Yeah, with that mix, you wouldn't really need it, would you?
Yeah. And you hear that from the bottom snare, but
it is
there a little bit. Here it is. Oops, sorry.
Are you compressing the bottom at all, or is that just...
No, the bottom snare was not compressed at all. Yeah.
Is it slightly saturating? It's got a nice, like...
Yeah,
crunch.
oh yeah, it is, yes. Thank you very much for reminding me. So we went and used your 1073, your Stam 1073, and we have the trim pretty low. So there is that little extra saturation coming from the mic pre just hitting a bit hard.
Yeah, it's not to the point where it's flatlined the waveform, but you can hear it. It's really nice.
It is. I've always loved hitting 1073s too hard. Whoever makes them, whatever.
Where are you boosting on the mids? You've got a bit of a mid boost going on there.
Yeah, I've got the 100 boosted, and I've got 3.2. So high mids, but not super high. Yeah.
I think that's quite key to a rock snare, isn't it? The in the snare bottom. Some other genres you want more just the sizzle, but
yeah, I do tend. You know, all the detail lives in the mid range, as you know. We have to be careful. So the front kick mic, it's called front kick, but it's actually the 67. And this ended up getting hit probably a little harder, but by the time I thought it was hitting a little bit too hard, I was like, I like it.
So you're referring to the pre being pushed, yeah.
It's the console. It's not going through any compression. It was the pre on the console. I think one of the mistakes I may have made, I mean, and it's not going to be a problem for mixing this whatsoever, because it was a new room. I did a lot more. Can I hear the tom? Can I hear the kick? Can I hear the snare? Where when I'm in like Sunset Sound or our own studio, we set up, put up all the mics, get all the rough settings done, and then just let the drummer play. I don't ask for individual things unless I'm deliberately trying to work on. Because this was all new and we were patching in as we went and we were trying different pre's, there was a lot of like, hey Jake, can I just hear that kick again? Can I hear that snare again? And I think what happened, well, I know what happened with the overheads, is I got him in a moment where it was all being played softer.
Right.
And then when we came to track, he started digging in harder. And most of the mics took to it like a fish out of water, but this one did not. And I actually don't care. It sounds pretty awesome. This is the mono overhead. It sounds fantastic.
You barely hear it. You just know that the snare's got that probably quite pleasant little bit of kind of limiting, but it doesn't sound flatlined at all, does it? Yeah.
But it's limiting ever so slightly.
But sounds great.
But the phase cohesion with the other two is perfect because they're all the same distance. Yeah, bang on. So you put all the overheads together, you get. Yeah, it's really nice.
Again, that Black Beauty style snare. No moongel or anything, it's wide open. It's ringing really a lot in the close mics, but as soon as you get back to the overheads...
Yeah, and you put the rooms up and the band in. I've often wondered, we do videos with different producers and engineers showing their drum sounds, and there's always a comment of like, that snare's really ringy. And I'm just like, have you ever listened to a Beatles record? Or a jazz record?
Or even, the most famous rock snare of all time in these days is probably the Paramore snare, and that's a super ringy. I mean, there's multiple super ringy snare samples put together. Yeah. That's what people are used to. I guess for me, there's kind of two schools with drummers I tend to work with. Either they're fine with that, or they typically reference Deftones, Abe Cunningham, the Terry Date, cranked, dry snare, and you need to dampen down a snare to get that sound. But.
Right. And then for the toms, just on the console, a little bit of EQ. I personally found I didn't like the cut on the low mids on the console. It was too wide, and I felt like I was taking out all the lows by cutting, so all I did was boost the lows on it and boost a little bit of high mids for a bit of attack.
So you're boosting around 3, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
And that makes the floor could definitely come up. It's just printing a little softer. And that's the Josephsons.
Yeah, they've got such a, that's working really. It's a very meaty sound, coated heads.
Yeah.
And you're not lifting the high highs, so you're just left with like they still sound very much like coated, punchy toms, don't they?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And here's the hi-hat, which is the blend of the 57 and the 451. As usual, I favoured the 57, and I printed them, bust them together. So it's favouring the 57 over the 451, but this is what we have. So it's got that was inherent, and we did pull a bit of it out on the EQ, particularly out of the 451, which exaggerated it. But I just made the call that it wasn't In solo, it was like, yeah, it's there. In solo, it's there, but it wasn't killing me. It wasn't the end of the world.
And you can always mix it differently. I'd be interested to hear just that gap where he's playing the closed hats, because obviously there he's wailing on the open hat, but just after the little gap, there, that's it. You've got those nice metallic overtones that will fill in the overhead sound really nicely. That's something I like to have in there, yeah.
Absolutely.
And arguably, you're not going to need to use much of that mic, when he's playing them open anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. On the ride, we got the phase good with the overheads.
Yeah. That's that Royer. It's so dark. For me, that's really dark for a ride mic, but you can boost it up.
Yeah, it's not, and it takes EQ really well, the Royer. Yeah. That actually, considering where it was positioned, it didn't get as much drum bleed as I thought it was going to get.
Yeah.
Considering how far back it is. But because it's in phase with the overheads, we can, it's not going to destroy the low end that we're gaining from the overheads. Sure. All right, so now we're going to get into, so this is the Coles, which I'm not in love with. I don't think it's terrible, but I don't think it's great. Here's the Coles.
Very kick heavy in the balance.
Which is fine because it's low down, and sometimes that's inherently what I use it for.
There's not too much room, even though it's obviously figure 8.
It's cool, but it's blended down to minus 16, 17 dB. It could be used as a special effect, and again, it could be a single drum source, if you want to do something. We've done all these multiple mics to demonstrate this.
And that was going through the Siemens, I think, right? I can see that labeled over there.
Yep, going through the Siemens. Now, the cymbal floor, so this is really, this is just desk with no compression. When you would have recorded at Swinghouse, I would have been using a Joe Meek pre-compressor.
Okay.
It was, I can't remember what it was called. I don't remember what it was called, but there was that green Joe Meek pre-compressor. But this is uncompressed, so you can have some fun with it. Yeah, you could really have fun with this. It's low in the mix. How low the cymbals and the hi-hat is.
In a way, it almost sounds, to me, it's like related to the sound of a snare bottom mic, but with much better and desirable kind of kick sound in there as well. So you could arguably not use the snare bottom and have that in there a little bit if it's in phase. And that
I would probably nudge it in phase and stick a Pultec with 60 hertz and just go.
Right.
And I think that's a drum sound, If I just grabbed 60 hertz and boosted the schnizzle out of it, I think it's a great drum sound. I do like what the Joe Meek used to do to it because I used to really smash it hard. So here's the brick wall. I think this is one I'm really the happiest with, and this is the M160s behind. They are, again, just on this AMEC console. Now with a sound like that, because it's got good overheads in it that aren't too offensive, maybe a little bit on the brighter side. If I did that with just kick in, snare top, and now just that. That might be my favorite single drum sound without us getting to the big room mics at the back there. So that's just in phase, equilateral triangle to the snare, pair of M160s, kick in and snare top using the 201.
A couple of comments. As we'll get to in mine, room mics behind the kit mean you're on the batter side of the kick drum. So
Yeah.
that sounds really good on the kick drum. I think you can hear the thump of the beta.
Yeah.
And secondly, we've bigged him up a few times, but Jake's consistency,
Yeah.
those 4 kick drums at the start
Yeah.
almost sound like a copy paste of the same hit. You know what I mean? So, and that's honestly doing so much work in allowing us to, allowing anyone to get a great sound here.
So here is the close room, which is your AEA. And this is one we spent a bit of time on to get to sound great, just because of the positioning, but you can refer to our breakdown on that.
We were worried that the AAA pre's were affecting the sound, so I think they ended up coming in on the desk.
Yeah, we ended up putting them back on the Amex. So definitely ribbons, definitely darker.
Loads of low mid punch. A lot more ambience coming back into it through the rear lobes than you got on the Coles, for example.
But that would be a fun one. You see, if I didn't have any other rooms, I would probably just go ahead and get the most generic reverb ever made, the D-verb, go to like maybe about a second-ish.
Right, yeah, I mean, especially maybe a bit of EQ before it.
Yeah, I was about to say a bit of EQ, pull out some sort of 80 to 100, put a little, you know what I mean, a little bit of that, get rid of a little bit of that, maybe dig around in some of the 400 to 700 region. But yeah, it definitely is a great stereo image of the kit, and I've done that many times. And that might be a quicker, easier way than feeding little elements of the drum kit and rebuilding a room that way.
What I love about the AA is the kind of 360 nature of the Blumlein capture. So you're really close to the kit, but you've also got nice ambience, and it's all kind of working really well together.
Yeah, totally. The far room is the 87s of the studio, and there, Andy, one of the owners here, his preferred way of miking the room. It's a very, and not to take away from him because it's obviously great, but that's a very typical inner room, high mics, inner room, capture the ambience, and it's great.
Mics in Omni, or do you happen to know the pattern?
I think I kept them in cardioid, but yeah.
I mean, in a room like this, it's so big and reverberant by there that it almost doesn't matter, right?
That sounds cardioid, there's too much directionality, if that's actually a word. I've done Omni in those kinds of situations, and it can be quite effective, but if I've got like a spare 414 that I might set up as a talkback mic with the band together, I'll put that in Omni so it captures everything, and then print that as a mono room mic, and that could be awesome just for energy and stuff like that.
For me, typically when I do that, I just automatically do Omni. You know you're going to get probably a slightly more bass light sound, and you just know you're getting everything off everywhere. And with that kind of spacing, it's still going to sound very wide, but obviously cardio is working great there.
So last but no means least is their magic mic, which is miking up the staircase. It's the corridor mic. Now, it doesn't really have any stereo relationship, obviously, but it has a stereo width, and so it's fun. And we were talking about this in the room, and I'd be intrigued, obviously, for you to do a similar thing as well, but if we just did minimal amounts of miking, like our favorite moments of microphones, like even just that, maybe throw in the toms, which have a lot of low end, but yeah, it's a very signature sound for the studio.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that makes engineers giggle a little bit, isn't it? Yeah. So it's so lovely to get that kind of sound, no samples, you know, and there's always that lovely authenticity when you know it's like the actual sound of the studio.
But you know one thing I missed?
What's that?
And I noticed it when I first came in. They have a mono mic hanging from the ceiling.
That's their talk back, exactly like you were describing.
Yeah, and what I should have done is done the townhouse thing.
Which is through the desk.
Yeah, through the desk, but we could have
emulated
emulated it with a kind of,
like soft knee limit kind of thing.
Yeah. But I didn't, so that's my thing. Well, let's have a quick listen to everything together. I don't know where we left it, mix-wise. Might want to turn it.
Yeah, why don't you just hit play and do a little balance?
Or it's just see where we left off. So that was with the Black Beauty, but we did have the Bell Brass, or as I like to say, Bell Bronze.
Thanks for the correction. That's very good.
So let's have a listen to that snare. That's actually better than I remember it. I remember being in love with the other snare.
Yeah.
And that actually might be the better one. But both of them sound like to me, like there's a little bit more low mid digging that needs to be done, a little bit more brightening here and there on individual drum elements. And
maybe
then it's
bringing the wires down, whether that's in the bottom or the floor cymbal might,
Yeah.
I think, you know, when you go, it's interesting because it's, you know, two very, very classic rock snares. It's the Pearl Steve Ferroni, but basically a Ludwig Black Beauty and the...
Which I know very well, I use it a lot. It's a great drum.
When you go to the Bell Bronze, it's higher tuned, but it's got a more abrasive character, I think, but it really works in heavy mixes and a bit of EQ work. The volume is insane, and obviously that's the snare of choice on Nirvana's Nevermind and Black Album. I feel like actually the way that's tuned makes me think a lot of the Black Album. But I often find the snare that you sound check with, if you made a good decision, often ends up being the one that you use. And I don't necessarily think that you build the sound around it, but you just get really used to how that sounds. You certainly EQ'd for that one. And then, you know...
It seemed to be quite magic with the Bronze, though.
Yeah.
I might be hard pushed. It's also interesting because there's a higher energy level.
Yes.
He dug in a little harder with that. I think he might have been more inspired with that snare.
Maybe, yeah.
I noticed immediately when we flipped between it that suddenly the kick was a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah, fair enough, yeah.
So... yeah, he might have just been more in love with it.
Maybe he heard all the horrendous things you said about him over the talkback.
All we did was say wonderful things about him because he's pretty darn amazing. I mean, look how aggressive he is right at the beginning.
Yeah. In a situation like this where there's no like compression and the balance is, you know, not yet final, I think the ringiness of the other snare is allowing it to have more of a you know, footprint. But I think this would mix up really well as well. Can we just one last thing? Can we hear the Beyer, the 201, isolated between the two mics, just to get a, you know, like that isolated view of how those two drums sound?
It seems to love the first snare more.
Do you think so? That's interesting. I think I'd go with the second one. Sorry, the first snare we recorded.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. That's what I mean. The order we just played them in. Yeah. So this is the first snare we recorded, which I think it loves more. And here's the second snare we recorded.
Got more like clack kind of sound in the attack on that one.
I would have spent more time. I probably would have dialed in an extra couple of dB of low end on that.
Maybe even backed off the top shelf, yeah.
Amazing. Well, that's a lot of fun. Let's have a listen to the drums in solo once more. So this is the Bell Bronze. And here is the Steve Ferroni Pearl. Amazing. I love that, yeah. Yeah, I do love that.
And having listened to the mics separately, you can hear the various stages of ambience kicking in through the snare decay. Like you can hear the immediate width off the closer mics, probably the overheads too. You can hear, maybe not so much the far U87s, I'm not sure, but you really hear the corridor extending out beyond the rest of the kit, and it's working really well.
So when you download these, you are going to be able to have all kinds of drum mixes. I mean, you get 1 mic drum mixes, 3 mic drum mixes, 2 mic drum mixes. The world is your oyster.
And I mean, we should add too. You got Jake to do one, like not
single
one
hits.
shots, but he did a few samples, some hard ones, and then a few softer ones of each of the snares and the toms and the kick.
So you're going to get all of that too. So you've spent actually more time here doing some metal.
Yeah.
For the Color Audio Cult.
Yeah, we did a super detailed thing. Everything from philosophies of drum tuning, drum selection, mic selection, how to set up a room for optimal results, sharing some of my kind of most recent discoveries about, miking on different sides of the kit, through to exactly how, we might EQ stuff on the way in, practical tips for people that don't have the setup like you have here. We're going to get into mixing too. There'll be a whole segment that we haven't yet filmed where I'm going through doing a rough mix of the drums that we recorded.
Amazing.
And all of it's very directly relevant to what we've recorded here because it's the same exact setup, just subbed in some different drums and played a different piece of music. So if you want more information about this recording, that's the resource to head for.
Excellent. I want to hear a mix actually. Can I do that? Is that okay if we launch straight?
Sure, yeah.
Because the last thing we heard of the other one, I just want an overall impression.
Right, yeah, sure, cool. Let me just hit play then.
My general impression is, without soloing stuff, is a lot more transient and a lot more of the corridor.
Yeah. Quite a lot more like kind of low end on the snare and the kick.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the room. There's definitely like an ooh, ooh, ooh on the kick that I would, if it's in the tracks, I would definitely want to take care of wherever that's coming from. But yeah, it's interesting. So, we set up everything and we did a drum recording with Christian for his course the day before with a more metal setup. Yeah. We pulled away the mics and then dropped in the drum kit, which ended up being the same one that you used, albeit with another floor tom. And just got our levels again, maybe made a couple of tiny tweaks. So this is coming off the back of that, and there's so much detail in that if people want to know like really how that was constructed. But I guess big differences. I had my kit at this end of the room.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
And I didn't have any baffles around it.
Yep. I
kind of set it up so that end of the room with the brick wall that you love so much for your close mics, was super ambient. So, that's one of the big differences. I'm feeling like there's a bit more of a kind of washy vibe to things, but also maybe a bit more like close mic driven in terms of like the attack. I've not done any compressing on the way in. So none of the snare and kick aren't compressed.
Yep.
And I guess let's just dig into it. So
yeah, totally.
We've got 3 kick mics. I'm using my Beta 91, that boundary mic. That is giving me a lot of the, almost sounds a bit slightly compressed, bright transient that it's a different take on the kind of kick sound that you got. So that sounds like.
Ton of transient.
Yeah, it's got that slightly squeaky, clicky kind of top.
Yeah.
How loud that ends up being in the mix is context dependent. But I really love to have that there. You can also, you could do some of the things you were describing, high pass it and use it just for the click or whatever. But it's got good lows too. It's not a thin sounding mic, but it's definitely, got lots of high and low. But that's blended with my Beyerdynamic M88, which I did a lot of EQ on the 1073. That top shelf is really, 10 dB or something like that.
Wow.
And also quite a lot on the lows, so just trying to sculpt it so that it's instantly a bit more of a smiley face kind of thing. So that sounds, comparatively a lot darker, but... So I'd say the kick in 1 is more slappy, and the kick in 2, the Beyerdynamic, is more of that like meaty kind of punch. Right. The two together, they'd probably find a balance that works. Actually, the two are fairly, even Stevens works quite well, I think.
I agree, yeah. I think the blend you have is fantastic. I want to hear what the kick out's going to do, because I suppose that's the only thing, is I am not quite hearing the ooh.
Sure, and it is a short sounding kick drum. Yeah. I don't know that the out's going to necessarily give us that, we'll see. So that's.
But I would assume of all the mics, that would be the one that might.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely got the potential, yeah.
I left more mids and low mids in there than you did, but I did brighten it quite a lot. You can hear that the hi-hat's sounding really quite bright through there, but that doesn't bother me, frankly.
What mic was the kick out again?
That's the JZ V11.
Right. It sounds better than the FET.
End. I agree. I think it's a killer outside mic. And
I do have one of those, so I suppose I could have stolen it from you, but then what would have happened is we would have had far too similar of a kick drum sound.
Sure. And for me, it's a minor player in the kick drum sound, the kick out, especially... Yeah, most of the time it's quite quiet.
But I think it goes back to what we're talking about. The FET 47 is the world famous outside kick mic, but it seems fairly easy to beat these days.
I think
that JZ mic definitely beats it.
I'll add, with some of the drummers that I record, it just clips the mic anyway, clips the capsule.
Okay.
I actually have a Stam Audio clone of a FET 47, and that can take more SPL and it sounds a bit more bright, and I like that one a lot. So could have brought that along, but I'm just really into the JZ at the moment. So that's that.
I'd like to hear that. It might be better than the... Yeah.
I think it is, frankly. And tell you what, it sounds killer on his snare bottom. It's a big old mic to put under there, but it's got a great kind of really big sounding representation. It's probably not too far off how yours sounded with the EQ.
Right.
So the two snare top mics, I've got the Neumann KMS 105, that handheld condenser, that's snare top 1. Snare top 2 is a regular 57, which I threw up mainly as a point of reference for people that know what that sounds like. Both of them getting some EQ on the way in, but a lot less on the Neumann, just because I love it because I love how it sounds naturally on snare. So that sounds like...
What snare is this?
This is a good one. This is a Maple Noble & Cooley. I love this snare. It's a wood snare. I came in and asked you before I set up, I was like, I wanted to know what kind of thing you were gunning towards, and you were instantly like, I never record wood snares.
Wood snares, I've done a few jazz recordings with wood snares, but most of the jazz guys I know like metal snares. I've done a few records where one song is a wood snare, and it's usually because it's a brushes thing, but even then I tend to prefer that on a metal one. I don't know, the Subharmonic is my favorite all-round snare, and that gets used probably 90% of the time. And I find like a Subharmonic can be tuned up, down, sideways, whatever. It can be sploshy and loose, and it can be super aggressive. But on a record, when you're stuck in and you've got a long period of time to experiment, a wood snare will make it onto an album, but it's not typically anything I reach for at first. So
especially, I assume, for not heavy-hitting rock kind of thing.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think these Noble & Cooley solid shell drums have got quite a reputation among studio players, and I think they're amazing. I bought that one because I used one a few times and just been like, this is amazing. It's got quite a wide tuning range, unlike a lot of wood drums, and it's 7 inches deep, so it's just got so much body there, as you can hear. And the attack is very soft. That's why I went for it, it's got all of the energy focused in that really powerful low end. and it's not abrasive in any way. So
it's fantastic.
I really like to use that on kind of more rock stuff. That's also wide open, no muffling, but it does sound a little bit less ringy, obviously, than the brass drum that you recorded. A little bit lower tuned as well. So the snare top one, that Neumann, it's got so much kind of low mid energy, which I really like. It's the opposite of the kind of clonky dynamic thing, which even though I've EQ'd the 57 a lot, loads of extra low end, you still get that like kind of thing coming through. So, you know, it's actually not a bad blend, but it's also cool to hear that even though the Neumann is a lot brighter, the bleed is considerably less. So Neumann. It's actually not that different, but it's very different in where it's coming in.
Yeah, I agree.
I think probably the next thing that would be interesting to compare is the overheads, where I've gone with small diaphragm condensers, and I'm all about trying to get the cymbals. I'm not really thinking too much about the shells. Centered off the snare drum still, so the shells I think sound good in it, but for me it's more about really stable, wide placement of the cymbals. So.
And of course, drummer's perspective on the hi-hat.
So that, like, for that kind of thing where they're hitting the two crashes, I want it. I don't necessarily want it on headphones to sound like it's just on one side, but really good differentiation. The attack doesn't sound phasey and wobbly. Hi-hat's really stable.
I think we got fairly similar results on that, to be honest.
I mean, there's definitely not as much beef.
Yeah.
If I find the toms. But there is a really nice kind of papery in a good way. The sound of the sticks on the heads is really well captured in those small diaphragms. So that's, you know, very much what I'm going for there. If I get like the mono overhead as well. I love it because it doesn't collapse the stereo image that much.
No, not at all.
But you really feel it on the snare, especially. It's just getting that extra kind of low end and the kick as well.
No, it's wonderful.
And that's a very similar microphone, so it's kind of three of the same type, making a kind of triple array. So I feel
like the Beta on the kick is a massive difference to the kick drum sound. Huge.
If I muted that, I think it would sound a lot more similar.
I think that, and I think the Neumann.
On the overheads? Oh, no, on the snare?
On the snare. Those two are adding like so much snap.
Room mic that would be really interesting to compare is my close room that I've done.
Oh,
they're behind the kit. So figure 8 C414s.
Yeah.
Not measured, but trying to find the spot where the snare is really sounding beefy. And the thing for me is how precise the imaging is on the cymbals. But the kick and snare are also still very, very much in the middle, still there. It's not like a hole in the middle of the stereo image. So. Hi-hats are like all the way over there, you know? Yeah. It's all the way over there. I kind of, in my head, I picture this almost like a Y shape of kick and snare here, and then all the way branched out to the side. So that's a really killer sound for me. Being figure 8 and that end of the room being so reverberant, there's a lot of room sound.
I'm very tempted to, because I think the 201 was a good takeaway for me.
Yeah, I'm going to take that one away for sure. Yeah.
I'd like to have tried the Neumann in the setup that we had, see how it was there. But I'm very tempted to take the Shure Beta mic and add that to the arsenal.
Yeah.
I think it could could be quite a big game changer.
I especially find a lot of drummers love to monitor that during tracking. Yeah. And it's so easy to do because you just flop it in. You don't need another mic stand to have it there. Even Behringer have done a copy now, and I mean, everyone has their opinion about that company. I won't weigh in. But their copy of the Beta 91 sounds amazing. It sounds pretty much the same, and it's like $60. So, like, you know, you could definitely go down that route if you wanted to.
No, it's phenomenal. I feel like if we take our kind of specialist mics, like your close room and the brick wall mic, if we both had the Betas, I think we would have very different but very similar drum sounds at the same time.
Yeah.
Like a signature way of recording rooms, which is obviously going to be dependent on the room. Each room is going to... Yeah, I really love it. This is fantastic.
So there's just a couple more. The room mics is the far room, which I use the AEA as a far room.
Right. Oh yeah,
option.
I'm interested to hear what that sounds
so
like.
it's not going to sound as wide, but back there, the way we treated it, it's so kind of washy. I love it.
Can you throw in the close room with it? Go between the two. Oh, it's interesting. It's bringing up a different fundamental low note on the snare.
Interesting.
Go, listen to the snare. It actually feels like it's playing an octave higher in the far rooms, and do you hear it? And it goes dot, dot, dot.
Yeah, you're hearing, I guess, some of the different reflections kind of coming in, and yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? But for me, to be honest, I love to imagine this like visually. Overheads, close rooms, far room, and if you just step back through those perspectives of the kit, I find it really cool. So mostly cymbal focused.
Yeah.
Kind of quite balanced. Mostly shells.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going for, is like these very clearly defined things I can blend. And then of course corridor, which sounds a lot like yours.
Yeah.
Even though the kit was differently, obviously it's a separate room, it's very similar. So let's just, while we've got the last few seconds to do this together.
Yeah.
Toms basically sound, very, very similar. I think I just cut a little bit more mids and maybe brighten them a little bit. The attack, it doesn't quite sound as thick. And then hi-hat, that angled mic position, just keeping, you can see how stable the waveform is.
Yeah.
It is slightly kind of distorting a little bit, but
Yeah,
I don't
it is,
mind that. And even when you get to the closed hats, I'd say there's less of the metallic overtone that you're getting, that chung chung kind of sound. There's less of that, and it's more of just a kind of fluttery sound, I'd describe it. But apart from that,
it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And we got single hits on this one as well.
Single hits on this one. There's also, really quickly, there's a Coles in front of the...
And the way you had yours positioned on the other side, there's a lot more lows.
Yes,
that's
that's true.
A lot more lows than we were getting.
Oh, I guess the one last wildcard mic, and that's all of us, that's all the mics, the D12. It's a room mic, which does have quite a lo-fi character, but I like it.
Great.
It's obviously a bit of a quirky EQ, lots of kind of hong-hong kind of sound in there, but you can find a use for that pretty easily, I think.
Amazing, amazing. Well, this has been an incredible exercise.
I wish we had more time, It's been great.
Yeah. We've had a blast here over the last couple of days doing this.
Yeah, it's been so good.
So everybody, of course, there will be a link down below if you haven't already downloaded them. Download all these multi-tracks and get to compare. And I don't think I've ever done quite anything as detailed as this.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something I'd love to see. Even if I wasn't involved, to see two producers approach the same, the same recording in the same space and just see what comes out. So it's been a pleasure to be a part of. Thank you.
Sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Let's find another room to do this in.
Well, you're spending more time over here, I think, so I'm sure we can make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely amazing.
Brilliant.
Adam,
Thanks
thank
so much,
you
Ryan.
very much.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So don't forget to download down below. There is a link underneath the video and probably in the description and I imagine pinned comment as well.